the proper tools. And I think the best tools for us to have right now is knowledge, understanding what we're dealing with, how we're dealing with it, the strategies that they're using, the strategies that we need to use. We have to be equipped if we want to win this, and losing is not an option for us. So I'm so glad that you guys are here with us. We have a presentation, very brief. We just want to address some things that a lot of parents across the state are having issues with. They want to know, is it in our schools? How does it show up? How do we identify it? What do we do about it? How is it affecting our kids and their education on both sides? So we're going to get the presentation rolling in a minute. There we go. So critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion is what we're dealing with tonight. Missouri Prosper is starting off in the Rockwood district. We had some lack of transparency. We had an email that was leaked that really kind of threw our parents into a frenzy because we understood that you guys aren't giving us the whole story. You guys are, feeding us things that aren't the truth, and we have to be a part of that. So we can thank COVID for uncovering that. It may not have given us anything else, but it did give us the opportunity to be a part of our kids' education and understand how this is showing up. So, the question of the evening, is critical race theory being taught in our schools? And the answer is a resounding yes. My frustration with the idea that a lot of parents are still asking this question is that they're being sneaky about it. When you understand the people who are creating these kind of curriculums, they are very cynical, but they're also masters of language construction. They use words like diversity, because who wants to stand up against diversity? Who wants to be that parent that's like, oh no, I don't like diversity? Like, nobody wants to be that. Nobody wants to say, I'm against social justice, so they use words that make you kind of feel bad about it. They also twist these words to mean something else. So they have like a little club where it's like, okay, we're gonna use social justice, diversity, racism, equity, inclusion, but it doesn't mean what you think it does. But we're gonna use it in the same conversation, so essentially, we're speaking different languages. So when you look at the curriculum, when you look at the websites, when you look at what the teachers are using, what they're saying, the books they're recommending, the professional development, when you look at the words anti-racism, bias, and whiteness, and justice, those are the things that allow you to say, yes, there is some remnants of critical race theory in my curriculum. So having just maybe a list of words that allows you to say, okay, well, what does this mean? What does this mean to you? Where do you interject this into my curriculum, and how is this helping my child? And they have to give you an answer. So I wanted to take some, I think we may be one slide too soon. We got one before that. Because this one is important. This one comes from the North Kansas City website, and it shows they have an equity statement. And so, looking at my highlighted words, you have racial equity, critical thinkers, systematic racism, racial injustice, oppression. All of those are in their statement. This is on a website for everybody to see, so it's like, hey, this is what we're about. This is what we are interjecting. This is what we believe. These are the values that we are instilling into our teachers and into our students. So if you want to know if it's there, just go to the website. Digging deeper into that, so I got all up in that website because that's what us parents do, because we have to know what's going on. Going into some of the policies, the board policies, one of the goals is to eliminate systemic disparities. How are we going to do that if we don't talk about the truth about what the disparities are? See, what they're doing is they're taking data, they're taking numbers, they're taking statistics, they're putting them out and saying, oh look, these black kids are not doing the same as the white kids. This must be racism. We don't look at culture. We don't look at family background. We don't look at trauma. We don't look at anything. We just label it as something, which means we cannot deal with the problem because we don't understand the source of the problem. It's not helping us. This is the Liberty site. This is a part of their professional development. This is what the teachers get to look at, be indoctrinated with, and then teach their kids. So I got to look at this cultural competency. I went out and I actually took it because I want to know what the teachers are learning. So it started off with a Caucasian man talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it had scrambled the screen in front of a black woman. For me, that is a representation of elevating black voices because that's a tenet of critical race theory. And she goes on her rant about racism, and then she goes on to say, race is a social construct. That's why I stopped it, because I've read critical race theory books. That's a huge tenet. So you may call it cultural competency, but you just rebranded critical race theory. So when they say it's not there, it may not be called critical race theory, but you better believe it's there. So I want you guys to know that you have access to this. You can go to the Liberty site, you can go and find different curriculums, different training, and watch to see what your teachers are actually consuming. So when you hear it, they'll say it's not a course, it's not a workshop, it's not a curriculum, it's a lens. When you put on glasses, you put on rose-colored glasses, everything looks pretty. You put on Marxist glasses, everything looks like oppressor and oppressed. It is a lens. It's a world view. It's the way of viewing the world, not just viewing history, viewing the people that you're talking to, viewing math. All of a sudden, math is racist. It's a world view, and you have to understand that you're dealing with people that see it as a lens. So everything that they filter through that lens is going to look like racism. So we had a lot of questions about social emotional learning and federal dollars. This is not necessarily my background, and I don't know a lot about this, but if you want to know if it's tied to federal dollars, yes. So when you're going on the website, they have a lot about, we have to do audits of your curriculum. You have to maintain equity requirements. So it's like, you may go in and they may say, no, this is above us and the school district has control of the curriculum, but they don't have control of the curriculum if they want funding. You want money, you do what I say. You want these grants, you put this in there, and we're gonna come in and we're gonna do an audit, and we're gonna give you an office of equity, and we're gonna keep track of what you're doing. Everything follows the dollar, so if you wanna know if it's tied to federal funding, of course it is. So, a big problem is disrupting our academic progress. So we're dealing with the Kansas City MAP test data. You have 40% of students that are below basic or just basic. So what does it matter what you put in history if we can't read? It doesn't matter. So we're taking away from what actually matters. We're not saying history shouldn't be taught, it should. We're not saying racism doesn't exist, it does. But we're saying this matters too. We're saying if we're going to start putting money somewhere, let's put it somewhere that's actually going to change that, because we shouldn't have over half of our students below basic or basic. Nobody wants to be basic. Come on. This is for Liberty. The numbers look similar. It just looks similar. So you have to understand that there is a problem. We've been failing our students for a long time, and this is not the solution. So looking at the ACT data, you can look at that line. It's downtrending. It's constantly downtrending. Let's go to the next one. Both of them, downtrending. So I want to put that into perspective of what that means for our students when they go to college. So this is the average ACT score of some of the local universities. And at the bottom you have our averages from Liberty and North Kansas City. We're not preparing our students. You're creating activists to fight for what? They're indoctrinating our students, and it's showing, and we're failing our students, and we have to fight. Children must be taught how to think, not what to think. What kind of world is it if everybody's just saying, oh, yes, I agree with that, that's right, whatever you say. It's not gonna work. So we have to do a better job of doing that. Diversity is fine. Respect, equality, that's the thing. And everybody knows that they're mixing up equality with equity, and those are not the same thing. So we have to move back to understanding that there is equality and there is inclusion, and we have made progress. And this place that we live in, America, is one of the best places on the earth. like to use this for our parents. It's kind of blurry, you can't see it, but as a parent, your first call is to the teacher. What is this about? Explain what this means to me. What is this curriculum? What is this assignment? How is this helping? What's the end goal? And if you can't get past that, then you go to the assistant principal, and then you go to the principal, and then you go, God, I can't see that.
I'm trying to make it bigger.
But you keep going until you have to go to the school board. So we don't want to just take it straight to the school board. We want to get an understanding first. Talk to the teacher, because maybe it's a misunderstanding. Then you talk to the principal to say, okay, she didn't answer that question. Can you answer my question? If they keep going, giving you the runaround, then we show up just like this. In their strength in numbers, we got to show up just like this to the meeting to let them know we're not to be played with. So, you can go to the next one. That's Missouri Prosper. That's what we stand for. We are here to support you guys. We are here to make sure that everybody is educated on what's happening. If we don't have the answer, we'll point you into the direction. So when you have a group of people like this, everybody has a different piece of the puzzle. Everybody has some kind of value. Everybody can add. You have a different story. You had a different experience with the teacher. So we need each other. We have to stay vigilant in this. We cannot give up. Now is the time where we push, and we push hard. So if you guys want more information, here is all our contact information. We are here, we are around. We're going to be doing this all across Missouri. They cannot stop us because we have to do this at a state level. This is not just about North Kansas City. This is not just about Rockwood. This is about Missouri as a whole. And if we want to come through, we got to come through hard, and we got to go straight to Jeff City. So we got this. We're not going to stop. You guys ask all the questions that you want, and we're going to get the answers we want. Thank you.
Time for question and answer. And if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand, and I'll pick on you. And then you're going to come up here, and you can either ask a panelist directly, or you can ask the whole panel, whatever you like. And so, is anybody want to? Oh yeah, and we're having this Dr. Mary Bernard, Mrs. Cecilia Johnson. They're going to have a seat there with Jessica Clark. Anybody have a question that they?
To be consistent with what I said earlier, so that we've got time for anyone that wants to share, a concern or ask a question. We're going to have everyone kind of, cycle through, and rather than getting into particular questions, throughout the entire time with interaction, that's going to slow the process down. So feel free, come up, share your concern, ask your questions. We're going to be kind of keeping track of the most commonly asked questions. We will, as a panel, be responding to those. But I think that'll be a very appropriate way to do that, and certainly appreciate that process. Thank you.
Do we have anybody that like Miss Mary? Come on up.
Thank you, Natalie and Doug and Missouri Prosper so much for putting this together. This is the first time that I've had a voice. I've written to Liberty School Board multiple times. I learned a long time ago, it doesn't matter. They won't listen. I started a Facebook page a year ago, and it's gotten real big. My concern is that my grandkids, we were virtual for a long time, and I had to make up for that. And it was impossible. It was impossible. These two kids are in special education, and the learning losses, Liberty Public School, probably none of them in Clay County are even thinking about learning losses or doing anything about it. And I want something done, because there is no excuse for these learning losses not have, there are six-figure people that make that kind of money. That's what they do. And I've gone to Jefferson City and I've testified. I've done everything I can, but I've gotten a brick wall when it comes to talking or emailing the Board of Education or talking to any superintendent or whatever. They just don't care. Instead, apparently, they want to politicize kids rather than teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's about educating the kids for their benefit, for their future, not for some political indoctrination. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being here. I too am a grandmother, which gives me a lot of extra time at home to do a lot of research. And my question is, we already have beneficial programs such as character education. Why is there such a huge push from our new federal administration? And why has the education of our children become so political?
Good evening. My name is Kevin. I'm here as a parent of racially diverse children, and here as a concerned parent for the schools in the area, and here also just with an understanding about some of these things that have been taught. I'm an attorney, and when I was in law school about 20 years ago, I began studying and hearing some of the same type of things, but it was under the auspices of critical legal theory. And that generally was started as a theory to be able to analyze oppression. And there's some good parts to that, and the fact that I think we believe and honestly understand that there's evil in oppression and that there's evil in the world. My concern as a parent is I began to see some of these same theories that I began to hear, I began to see within our school system. I began to see within the work that my kids were doing and being taught, began to see it when I went to the school board meetings, and also as a previous school board member about 7 or 8 years ago, we talked a lot about education achievement. We talked a lot about excelling in educational experiences and things. I began to see that start to dwindle and begin to focus on more of these things. It was never called critical theory. Which could involve various forms of oppression. It was never called critical race theory, but I began to see some of the same euphemisms used. My concern basically is fourfold, and that is, first of all, that critical race theory neglects the human dignity of us all. That is, whether you're in whatever group that critical race theory wants to categorize you in and keep you fixed in that, we all have human dignity. Ultimately, I believe it comes from being made in the image of God. Secondly, critical race theory neglects human depravity on the other end. That is, we all have sin, there's all evil, and none of us, regardless of what group we're in, and what group people want to categorize us in, none of us are morally superior to others. And third is, on a personal level, I began to see that critical race theory tells my white child on the one hand that she's inherently evil just because of the color of her skin. On the other hand, it tells my Hispanic and Native American children that they're incapable of exceeding, that this system is fixed against them. And it's always going to be that way, it always has been, and they're incapable unless the institution comes in and changes things for them, that they can't achieve what's in them. What I believe God has given them in greatness that they can achieve, that they can do great things regardless of what other labels people are. And then my fourth concern for the school districts is that I feel like a lot of this has overtaken and overshadowed that aspect of raising up children and giving them hope. There's not much hope when you have a worldview such as critical theory. There's not much hope. And we're not giving the children hope. We're not giving the education that they deserve. We ultimately made a decision because of critical race theory on one hand, and because of some others where just the values weren't what we believe, but we ultimately made the decision that we needed to pull our kids from the public school. And that pained me, because I like the North Kansas City School District. It's fantastic. On so many fronts, there are good things about it. And I have awesome things to say about the administrators and the teachers and things like that. But we made a decision that we had to first of all, make sure our kids were right. And so we did that. But thank you for listening to my concern. I hope that it'll help, and I'm certainly willing to talk to anybody that would be willing to listen. Thank you.
So I am actually a recent law graduate, and I can basically echo everything he said about critical legal theory and the way it has infiltrated our schools. But I'm actually not here to talk about that specific part, and instead I want to read off a list of the consequences of critical race theory according to the scientific research. First and foremost, it increases the likelihood of teachers to support these stereotypes rather than to reject them that they have about their students. There is actually a substantial amount of evidence that shows that they are more likely to mistreat their students under a CRT program. Second, it also leads to many of the people who graduate through CRT programs to treat white students even worse as well, seeing them as incapable whenever they fail because they are so privileged that if they're failing, it is of their own fault entirely, so they can receive no possible benefits from further help. It also has been shown that the underlying premises of critical race theory have been breeding race essentialism in our schools. And this race essentialism is the underlying belief that race matters so fundamentally that there are differences among the races. It's ironic that a belief system which claims to be about the social construct of race is creating more race essentialism. The last thing that I want to point out is that the underlying premise of critical race theory, which is implicit bias, is pseudoscience at best. It is scientifically unsound, and there have been repeated studies and meta-analyses showing that it has no basis in reality. So the very foundations of critical race theory are flawed. I have 5 copies, I didn't realize how many people there were, but everything I've said is on here with multiple sources to back it up. If you guys would like, I'm just going to leave it here and you can take it and move.
If you could, just for the benefit of people up here, go ahead and just mention your name. So long as people say that, I think we're all behaved. So just your name would be great. And the school district that you're identifying.
I was going to do both, so I'm ahead of the game. My name is Anna Cardwell. My children are going to be in the North Kansas City School District. Just a little precursor to my concern. We are actually transplants from North Carolina. We moved here about 2 weeks ago for my husband's job. My county in North Carolina was very heated and actually went viral for school board infighting from parents and school board members surrounding this issue. There was very little transparency in what was going to be provided in the curriculum, and we had a new curriculum pass actually right before we left that was introducing even more critical race theory into the curriculum starting in kindergarten. So I have a rising kindergartner, I also have a 4th grader that's going to be entering North Kansas City schools. And the first thing that we did when we moved here and we realized which school district we were going to be in was try to see what the curriculum was going to be for our kids and try to understand what information was going to be presented to them in the classroom. I send my kids for math, science, reading, writing, basic skills, basic education so that they can go to college and then decide what they want to specialize in and if they want to enter into these different social, curriculums. Okay, my 3rd grader barely passed state standardized testing last year for reading and math. But he got a lot of exposure into social issues, which I think is highly inappropriate for 3rd graders. Okay. And I also want to just add that I have 4 boys, all under the age of 9, biracial family. My husband and I both come from white and black parents. Okay. My children don't need to come home thinking that their white grandparents are in some way oppressing them. It's highly inappropriate. So my main concern and what I want to understand is because there's very little standards and very little curriculum being presented to parents, what is the standards and the rubric that you are going to hold the educators to
in what they are saying to kids in the classroom. If my children come home and they start repeating these ideas that conflict with what they're learning in Sunday schools, how are these teachers going to be held accountable for the information that they're presenting that's not helping them learn how to read, learn how to write, learn how to do math? Thank you.
I just needed to know if there were questions.
Well, I think we all like to answer.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Gwen Van Asselt, and I'm a proud parent of 3 Northland kids. Additionally, I'm a teacher. I'm here tonight because I'm curious if these efforts of the Missouri Prosper go through, how will that impact my work with students? I've been a teacher since I graduated from MU 24 years ago. I have a master's degree in curriculum and instruction and a master's degree in literacy. My effort to hone my craft and be excellent at what I do is not the exception, it is the rule in my field. I understand learning theory, behaviorism, cognitivism, thinking and memory, constructivism are central to my work. I use these theories to select strategies to teach the Missouri learning standards every day. For example, as a reading specialist, I utilize constructivism, which is learning by doing. I know that one of the keys to becoming a better reader is to read a lot. Reading motivation is really essential. I draw a lot on the work of Dr. Bishop at Ohio State, and she teaches the importance of seeing yourself and others in text. And she talks about mirrors, seeing yourself, windows, viewing the world of other people, and sliding glass doors, accessing information that allows you to have access to something different. I feel like we're in a real renaissance of children's literature. I love children's books. I feel like if I were an real art person and I was alive and the Mona Lisa was written, that's how I feel about children's literature. I use so many amazing books in all 3 of those categories with my students to really motivate them. And I am sorry for the people who their children are struggling, but let me tell you, there are many teachers like me who are working our fingers to the bone. And we will continue to do that, but I'm very curious if these efforts of Missouri Prosper go through, how that will impact the literature I'm allowed to use with my students. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brittany Ross. I'm with the Liberty School District. I am a former teacher, not here in Missouri, but in Texas. And I pulled my kids from the public school prior to COVID, which was a blessing in disguise. Not because of what's going on now, but because of other issues that Mrs. Clark pointed about, just the failing to teach phonics and reading and writing. When I pulled my 7th grader out of school, I was really frustrated at his spelling and writing skills and how far behind he was. And he was a straight A student. That's what shocked me. I want to speak specifically to legislators because I believe that freedom of choice and competition is always the right answer. And my options right now are to homeschool or to go back to work so I can pay to send my kids to a school that reflects my values. And those shouldn't be my only 2 options. School choice is the answer. If people want to send their children and teach these things, then okay. I have the choice to send my kids to a school that reflects my values as well. Thank you.
So to your comment and your question or concern, tomorrow is actually a tremendous day in Missouri as far as education. Tomorrow at 9:30, our governor will be signing our first real impactful piece of school choice legislation, which is an an empowerment scholarship account that allows parents and students to access other options and make them more affordable for them. So it gives them scholarships that allows them to go to private schools. If they choose to keep their children in public schools or charter schools, they can use that to supplement that education for things like tutoring and things of that nature. Also, special needs things as well. So we are making inroads legislatively. I work in school choice, activism. And many of you guys I did see this year when we were advocating and lobbying to get this piece of legislation passed, or anything passed for that nature. But I will say that in order to get these things passed, we do have to be present. You know, there are too few people that actually dedicated their time and put forth effort in order to see these things get passed. And we did get a tremendous piece of legislation passed that will be passed into law tomorrow. But that's only the first step. These kind of things are incremental. These things are not, how do we eat an elephant one bite at a time? You can't just eat it all at one time unless you're me, because I love to eat. But that aside, these things are incremental, meaning that, you're not going to get everything accomplished in one fell swoop. There's going to be something that's we call a wedge issue to get our foot into the door, get that door open, and then each and every year we go and we add to it and open it up a little more. In addition to that piece of legislation, which was HB 349, correct, Representative Ritchie? Okay, yes, sir. So we had two of the legislators who that supported it as well. Can we give them a round of applause? But in addition to that, there was also legislation that was presented by a couple of representatives that would have made it so that it was that school districts could not teach critical race theory in the state of Missouri, and we had even less people that were coming there vocalizing their support for things like that. So a lot of these things, I know we want to have a sounding board, we want to be heard, but we need to make sure that we're making ourselves heard by the people who can actually make these changes, who can actually impact policy and legislation, so that our kids aren't being taught these things or having these things shoved and forced down their throat in the future.
Hi, my name is Susan Edwards. I'm a patron in the Excelsior Springs District. And this is mainly for the legislators. I hope you all are aware of revised statute 161.1050. That establishes the Trauma-Informed School Initiative, which sounds really good. But they've redefined trauma to include a lot more than just you're in a horrible accident, terrible things have happened to your family, and other things that one would normally consider to be trauma. DESE is also supporting this. The legislation encourages the school districts to contract with any organization that can help them to establish a trauma-aware or informed school and community. Most of them have contracted with Alive and Well. Alive and Well is based in St. Louis and in Kansas City. They're also affiliated with BLM, which is a Marxist group. And I invite everyone to go to their websites, dig deep, just keep clicking on the links, click on the links, and you will find more and more. But this is mandated through legislation. So I would like the legislators, and this was done back in July 2017. So it's been here for a while. As I said, DESE supports all of this. The state school board also supports all of this. And for school board members, keep in mind the federal government is maybe 6 to 10% of your budget. We do have a case where the tail is wagging the dog.
My name is Thomas Smith, first of all. I represent Frederick W. Foundation of Missouri. And I'm not a parent, but I was the child. I was that kid. And so I'm going to make a statement. First of all, I want to thank everybody who's here, because if you look at the faces, it's diverse. And I mean diverse as in the people. I've watched many of these board meetings or whatever on YouTube, and more often than not, you would see either all white, all black, or whatever. This represents what it's about. And for me, as someone who grew up in the foster care system, product of a failed adoption, and in the midst of that, I had 3 family members who were murdered because they were black. 2 were dismembered. And I remember as a child, this happened in the 80s, about 1983. I remember as a child, a question coming to me as a child. What do? Do you blame an entire culture of people, the white culture, for the actions of those individuals that killed my family? And I remember as a child answering out loud, talking to myself, and I said no. And that brings us to where we're at today, critical race theory, no matter how you want to package it. What is it achieving when we're teaching that all white people, even those who did not have anything to do with slavery, are responsible for the oppression of minorities today? What does it achieve? It doesn't. The only thing that it's achieving is more racism. More racism. So let me leave y'all with this. We need to change a narrative, because we like to say white race, black race, Hispanic race, Asian race. That's actually not accurate, because the word race means species. And unless each one of us are from different planets, we're not different species. So, we're different cultures, one race, the human race.
I would also say that reality, the fact that we are one human race, not individual races, is in fact acknowledged in critical race theory. Yes. Despite the fact that critical race theory has existed in intellectual, academic, and some legal spheres for about 40 years, we've seen a sharp uptick in the last year of its discussion in our national conversation. More specifically, we've seen a large swell of opponents to critical race theory, and particularly those that would oppose the application of critical race theory in our K-12 schools. Some in here might posit, and I would be among them, that many opponents don't fully grasp what CRT is and what it isn't, and those people might also point out that there is a big difference, despite what was mentioned in the presentation earlier, that there is a difference between critical race theory and the other CRT, which is culturally responsive teaching. I would know, I'm a veteran teacher of 10 years, and I've written countless documents of curriculum, and so I do know that difference between the two. But I'm putting all of that aside for the moment and asking a different question. My question has to do with the top-down legislation that impacts our school leaders' abilities to make choices for the families and students they serve. Do you not find it problematic that in places like Idaho, Iowa, and Oklahoma, vaguely worded laws have already been passed that ban schools from making their own decisions about what curriculum to teach and what resources to use? I ask about these states because Missouri, as you know, is set to follow suit if we allow it, and this concerns me greatly. And it should really concern anyone that isn't a fan of government overreach. So I ask you, do you support such vague, sweeping, top-down legislation that robs local governments and local districts of making their own decisions, of using their educational expertise and their community's input? And are you concerned about the precedent that sets in regards to stripping local schools of local control? Lastly, if you do support such legislation, should that be interpreted as a complete lack of trust in local school leaders and community members like the ones in this room to make decisions for themselves? The reason I say this, and I recognize that my position is probably very different from a lot of people in the room, and I know that. And that's what this dialogue is for, different positions coming together and being equally represented. But I also think that, and something that you mentioned earlier, Jessica, was that, parents and community members and teachers can partake in that process, can go to our school boards and have these conversations. And I agree, that's where these conversations should happen. Having a piece of legislation written in Jeff City that trickles down throughout all of our schools and makes those decisions for schools, rather than letting these conversations happen in our schools only, that's really concerning to me. It really feels like an inappropriate decision on behalf of legislators if they choose to support that piece of legislation. So that's my question, and I would really actually love an answer to that. Thank you.
I'll take the question. What I present in the PowerPoints that I do around the state and that I presented last night were the actual slides that were FOIA'd by parents from the Springfield Public School District of material that was presented to them in their professional development training. And one of those slides was of the two aspects of white supremacy. You're either a covert white supremacist or an overt white supremacist. And if you said, all lives matter, or we are one human race, then you are a covert white supremacist. And another slide in that same material was a definition of white supremacy by Robin DiAngelo, who wrote White Fragility. And in that definition, she describes white supremacy as basically a group concept, that no person, if you think white, so it wasn't necessarily restricted to just Caucasian. If you think white, you are also a white supremacist, which would mean people of color who accepted the same values of capitalism and other aspects of whiteness as defined by Judith Katz. Check Judith Katz, 1990, aspects of whiteness, aspects and assumptions of whiteness. That's what's written into the definition. So when you examine that, it's the aspects of whiteness are basically components of Western civilization, including logical thought, which would be mathematics. The justice system that depended on the discernment of intent in a behavior, not just the statistical outcome. That's an aspect of whiteness. So that critical race theory is actually advocating for a different justice system based on outcomes, not the discernment of intent. It is an overturning of the worldview, not just of white people, but the worldview that was of the biblical constructs that our founding documents were grounded in. Well, that's one. Second, regarding local control, first of all, the state has the authority for education. When in our Constitution it says in Amendment 10 that anything not enumerated here is a power that belongs to the state and the people, education fell into that group. The state, the legislature in our Constitution, Article 9, this Section 1A, it's the legislature authorized to offer a public education. Where you're discussing local control and local school boards, that power has been usurped for years by the State Department of Education, particularly since 1990, when the introduction of standards and accountability was introduced in the Outstanding Schools Act. Because you were given the ability to select curriculum as long as it fell within curricular frameworks. The noose around that neck got even tighter with Common Core. And regardless of what the standards say, in terms of Missouri learning standards, your Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed is singing to the tune of the trade organizations and the U.S. Department of Ed with regarding to accountability and data collection. And so the standardization of education comes basically a flow-through of the grant money, and the accountability then is achieved through your Missouri School Improvement Plan, which is MSEP 6. All right, so the sword of Damocles handing over every school board's neck or head is the accountability system for MSEP, where the state can come in. If you don't comply, the state can come in and take over your school district. That's not freedom. That is extortion, and we need to call it what it is.
All right, a lot shorter than everybody, I guess. I'm Megan Nielsen. I am a parent of children at the Liberty School District. I had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Westfall and then a couple of the other assistant superintendents a couple of weeks ago surrounding the same thing. I spoke at a board meeting a couple months ago, and I had some questions regarding what I had done some research on. And while I felt that Dr. Westfall in particular and Dr. Seahorn Dixon they're super responsible, respectful, and kind, and I feel like they're trying to do the best thing, and really left feeling like people aren't doing their research with what this is. For instance, they're collaborating with the Core Collaborative Group, and if you research them, Dr. Floyd Cobb is one of the proponents of this, and I believe that they have a book that they are suggesting that their leadership development team is reading. And I read the book, and it talks about a lot of this stuff with whiteness and, about the racism and all that stuff, and it frames it in a way that makes it sound pretty, right? But it's also, as I'm looking at all of this, I'm thinking, this is exactly what this is. This is critical race theory. My concern was that in the meeting that I had, they kept telling me over and over that this isn't for the teachers, this is up at the top. But the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and what we're allowing our leadership team to be reading, or maybe asking them to read after Dr. Burns' comment, that's obviously going to have a trickle-down effect into our schools, and that's what concerns me, is that I know we were looking at the triangle thing about how we should go to the school teachers first and then the administrators, but the problem is, right, it's top down is what's happening right now, and we can't go to the school teachers because they're not at a point yet where they even understand what is being force-fed to them, if that makes sense. So we have to be able to pick this out at the top. So that's why I'm here. One of the groups that they collaborated with in the Liberty School District was the Beloved Group. And if you go to their website, it's, I believe it's iambeloved.org or wearebeloved.org, is that it? It links to Black Lives Matter, and then it links to a page where it talks about how they talk about using racial identity caucuses and how they need to separate teachers and administrators between black and white and between races to be able to let them have that space, right? And we know that these affinity groups are pretty popular. It's something that has kind of come out, but the answer that I got from the school district was mostly that, oh, we just pick and choose parts of this system. We don't use all of it. But I'm not okay with even that being, why would we choose that group? But that's something that's on their website as a main tenet for them to use, and that they're proponents of this. Why is that a group that you are using in my child's school? That's not okay. The other issue was that the Robin D'Angelo's white fragility book, is being used as well, and they did it as an equity cohort, and I guess it was voluntary for, again, the leadership of the school district to read these books and discuss them. So you want to talk about race was on there, white fragility. There was a couple others that I can't remember, but again, the same thing was that they continued to tell me it's voluntary and it's not something that they're being forced to do, but where's the accountability for why that this is even being allowed in the first place? I read white fragility and it's not appropriate for a leadership in school to be doing that and then teaching that, and basically indoctrinating their teachers into that. So anyways, I just want to know how we get them to understand that this is not appropriate at any level, even if it is voluntary. And the other thing I suggested was, okay, I'm taking a long time, I'm sorry, but we teach one side of everything now, And I don't want curriculum banned. I don't want books banned. I don't think that's healthy. I think that if we offer a reading of Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, we also offer Shelley Still's White Guilt. Or we offer, in response to the 1619 project, we better offer the 1776 project as well. Hopefully that the teachers that are concerned about the curriculum understand that we are not advocating that we whitewash history. We know what happened, and we understand that, and we want our kids to understand and learn from the past mistakes. But we cannot only teach the bad. We have to teach both sides, and we have to be more well-rounded. So.
I think one of the assumptions we make as people who value education is that it means the pursuit of truth. And we don't expect that a subjective narrative is going to replace the pursuit of truth in history. And we don't expect that only a portion of history would be taught that aligns with the Marxist agenda of conflict. If you're going to teach racism, then you have to teach the human experience of racism since we have it in recorded history. And you have to teach slavery within the races as well as between the races, which isn't being done. And you have to teach the truth of what is documentable about history, and I'm referring specifically to the Declaration of Independence and the reason for the American Revolution, which has been reframed, in her own words, by Nicole Hannah-Jones to put in center a narrative about Black community that is not true when compared to the original document that is the first draft of the Declaration of Independence. She gives no history of Jefferson calling out King George for overturning every act of the colonies to abolish slavery. Instead, she says, the American Revolution was fought to preserve slavery despite George's attempt to get rid of it. Where did that come from? And why would the current presidential administration hold that up as a model of the new history that should be taught to our kids when we have documents in the Library of Congress showing otherwise? And I'll tell you why that paragraph was removed. It was because of the representatives from South Carolina and Georgia. You can go to Jefferson's autobiography and he explains the representatives of two colonies wouldn't sign the Declaration unless that paragraph was removed, because hey, if the revolution didn't work out, they still wanted friends in England. Okay? Representatives from Jefferson City should know how sausages are made. But that's not appreciated, and Jefferson is smeared and actually vilified for something he didn't do. That's not history. But that the lack of objectivity, and Nicole Hannah-Jones said, history isn't objective. It is my telling of the narrative, because it's whoever controls the narrative that controls the national memory. Well, she's got that right. But in my mind, as an educator in pursuit of truth, I will go to the primary documents and say, what was left behind for us to review? I wouldn't just make it up because it satisfied some urge I had. That is an anathema to calling myself an educator. And that's why we have a problem with people who call themselves critical race theorists and their idea of subjectivity rather than evidence.
So, my name is Jamie Johnson. I am a parent in the Park Hill School District in Tri-County. I actually agree with the last speaker, White Fragility was not my favorite book. I believe that there are authors of color who have firsthand experience and authenticity and speak to the themes in White Fragility with a lot more conviction. I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. I don't know, so I wouldn't be wrong. So I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, as it was the South. It was much more diverse atmosphere than here. As diverse as it was, everything I learned about Black history outside of Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks in February was taught to me by my parents. I can't remember my age when I had the opportunity to experience a person of color author, artist, historian in terms of school curriculum. 25 years later, my kids, as a part of the Park Hill School District, have had a similar experience. My truth is, when you live in a community where seemingly none of what's important to you, and I could seem actually, where none of what's important to you seems important to the systems you are a part of, that can create a hardness that does not easily dissipate. When we are able to create safe spaces to share our experiences, we can find commonality. When we hide our authenticity, we create stories about others and their otherness that may not be true and that create division. Teaching our history does not create division. It creates the ability to see each other as human because we've had different experiences and all of those experiences are valid. To Mr. Corlew, I don't know where he went, but to Mr. Corlew, teaching our whole history tells your children that someone has had a different experience than you, and that is valid. It specifically teaches your Hispanic children that their experience outside of the comfort of your home is valid. Unfortunately, race matters in the sense that we have had different experiences, and there is historical context as to why. The only question I have for all of you is, why do you get to decide that my ancestors' experience is less valid than yours?
Okay. I appreciate everybody's perspective. We're here about education. I think that we all have, as parents, a common goal. We want our children to be successful. We want them to learn. We want them to show up in the world. History should be taught. Nobody's saying that one history is more important than the other. I have 2 Black daughters who went to a Chinese school, and they learned Chinese history. They learned history. They didn't learn American history, and they speak Mandarin, and they love the Chinese history that they learned. I get to teach them my family history. I get to teach them, you know, their stepdad's Hispanic history. I get to teach them American. They go to school and get American history. History is all around us. It is. Nobody's saying that it's not. But when it comes to changing the whole curriculum to bend around certain experiences, school is not about that. School is not about who had what experience in life. Yes, we want to create an environment where everybody can feel safe, but the main objective to school is to learn how to show up in the world. We want them to know how to read. We want them to know how to do math. We want them to know how to show up and do science so that when they get out, they can add to society. If everybody's a history buff, what are we going to just sit around and talk about history all day? Who's going to maintain the structure of society? We're not saying history shouldn't be taught, but you should not come and destroy the foundation of the system. You're saying that the system is bad. You're saying that capitalism is bad because that's whiteness, and whiteness is bad. It's deeper than that. No, I'm letting you know what is actually being said. You're saying that your history matters, and everybody in here agrees. Do we agree with that? But the way that it's being put into school is not just about history. It's not just saying, we're going to add this one chapter, or we're going to add this into the curriculum. We're changing the whole curriculum. We are taking our teachers and saying, you need to understand your whiteness. How does that make a teacher feel? And then she's going to look at her white kids and say, oh, well, you don't understand your whiteness. This is a lens. This is a worldview. This is not just about history. Your history is American history. So, but when you're teaching in a way that separates you as American, it's not the same. Everything is divisive. We want to unify the community. So when we see something that separates us, you have to speak out. You have to speak out on it. And so to my teacher, I appreciate.
How many minutes in a day is history taught in any of your schools in comparison to math, reading, writing? History is, I teach history in context of reading. Good writing is meaningful, good meaty writing, but it is not very, if you do the research on the minutes per day, it's quite small in comparison. I feel like you're sending this disinformation.
That's not about anything. So we want to collaborate with teachers. That's why we create this space. We want to understand what you deal with in the classroom because we don't always know. But if we're not creating an environment, if we create an environment that feels hostile and everybody feels attacked and things like that, everything that comes out of Missouri Prosper wants to be collaborative. We can have, you talked about how we want to have black faces in the books and have a mirror. That's fine, but why does it have to be a book that talks about oppression and oppressors? Why can't it be just a book about black success?
So I appreciate the conversation that's taking place. What I would like to know, how many parents are still wanting to come up and share their thoughts and ask questions? Because that's what I want to make sure that we're living up to what we had mentioned. So what I'm most interested in right now is an opportunity for our constituents to be able to share their concerns, ask their questions, on either side. It doesn't matter to me because this is informative. I find it very helpful to learn from people that sometimes I disagree with. So I appreciate those who have spoken so far, and I'm sure I will continue to appreciate those who will continue to speak. So I'm going to go ahead and shift and have the next person come and so we can live up to our promise to our parents and other constituents, teachers, whomever that may be here. If you would like, the question was, can you just line up? That is entirely appropriate. Just make sure that you respect each other's particular interest in space or what have you. So, okay. Thank you very much.
Good evening, my name is Deborah Cole. I'm a transplant from St. Louis. I have to admit, I actually did work in the Rockwood School District once upon a time. I was a school nurse there, and I'd like to shift gears a little bit, and I know this is all about CRT and what's going in the minds of our children. But as a retired nurse of 40 years, I came across this last week, and I am concerned about what they're going to do to the bodies of our children. And this was brought to my attention by South Dakota Senator Brian Mueller. It is 20 USC 1232H, Protection of People Rights. When I downloaded the state, text contains those laws in effect on July 10th. I think I've got a new July 12th, but it's identical. If you want to look it up, I'll repeat that it is 20 USC 1232H. And I want every parent to know this, and I like to consider myself pretty much on ball with what's going on. But apparently, there are certain activities that the federal government is requiring that parents be notified. And one of those is non-emergency invasive physical examination or screening.
Can you say it again, please?
Yes. Any non-emergency, invasive physical examination or screening that is required as a condition of attendance, administered by the school and scheduled by the school, and not necessary to protect the immediate health and safety of the student. Well, what would a invasive physical examination be? Well, luckily they provided a definition for us. 6 definitions. B, invasive physical examination. The term, quote, invasive physical examination means any medical examination that involves the exposure of private body parts, or any act during such examination that includes incision, insertion, or injection into the body, but does not include a hearing, vision, or scoliosis screening. Well, thank goodness, because I never had to strip any child to do a vision exam. So, the minimum notification is once a year at the beginning of the school year. The senator from South Dakota suspects that's being dumped in the handbook. And when you sign that handbook, you are signing away your rights as a parent.
Yes.
So here are my questions. As a nurse, I was taught that a signature on a paper does not constitute informed consent.
That's right.
So here's my questions. Who will be doing these invasive examinations? Because when you start incising, you've now moved to a surgical procedure. Where will they be? Will they be on campus? Or will my child be taken off campus to another facility? Who will be doing these procedures, and how will I know they are qualified? What if there's follow-up needed for this surgical procedure? Who will be doing that? What if my child is allergic to medications or has some other health issue? Who will be there to advocate for my child and share that information? And the most concerning of all, if my child is injured or dies from these invasive procedures, who will be held accountable? Who will make long-term care decisions should my child outlive me if he is injured and unable to do so? And who will make funeral arrangements for my child should they die? And if you think that's a tin hat, well, that's just for another day. I'm getting a little upset here. So nowhere in 20 USC 1232H does it mention informed consent. So I am raising the alarm for every parent and grandparent in this room and share it with everyone you know. Do not sign your rights away. Stand up and take your authority back. It is your authority, Mom and Dad, not the school, and certainly not the federal government.
Hi, my name is Carrie Heffler, and my child attends the Carmen School District. What I'm presenting to all of you, we're asking all of you, you have just blindly accepted to follow Missouri DESI. I am a former teacher. I know what their rule and regulations are. They have far too long been able to do whatever they want to and have not been audited. I posed a question to our academic service director, who I have immense respect for. We were talking about a particular subject matter that gets to fall under the DEI, inclusion, which deals with sex education. Because we absolutely know and have found during the whole COVID shutdown what the school districts were doing, which is hiding things in other subject matters so that we would not find it. Now, I'm not saying this is necessarily of Kearney, but what I'm asking all of you is you better start being aware of what your individual teachers are doing. And I have immense respect for teachers, but we have teachers that are trying to push agendas. Have you even taken a look at the Missouri DESI website as to what they are using? That was the response that I got. Well, we do follow Missouri DESI because you think, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. Well, have you even taken time? Do you have someone on your staff, in your faculty, that does nothing but monitors what's going on in Missouri DESI? Because you would be appalled if you saw what that sex education curriculum is. What they want to teach 3rd through 5th grade is disgusting. There is no 8 to 10-year-olds do not need to be learning about fisting. I could go on. It's just horrible. So you need to take a look at what's getting put in other categories. We know that we are wanting to provide a safe space for all these students that are having a difficult time finding out who they are. I don't think there's a single parent here that would not want a child who's has identified as LGBTQ to come to school and not feel safe. We all want that. We know that falls under that inclusion. But then this is what's coming in elsewhere. That's a parent's responsibility to teach their kids sex education. We know the subject matter will come up, and we know it comes up starting in middle school. But we need you to be involved with what your teachers are teaching. And we need you to start pushing back. You can do far more than we can against Missouri DESI. You need to start holding them accountable for the stuff that they put out there. Same with you, legislators. We need you to tell them, you do not put this stuff in front of our schools. And then they feel like they have to do it because it's some grant, that they're not going to get certain money if they're not following what Missouri DESI is doing. How about you sign the bills to do an audit of them? I think you would be appalled what you would find. Thank you.
I have a question. Going back to kind of what I was talking about earlier about people actually going to the Capitol and to actually speaking with legislators and advocating for these things. My question, and she left the room, to her would be is, how often have you done it yourself? Because there's a lot of things, These people work very hard. I'm very familiar with them. They're very hardworking, good guys on the good side, or on the good right side of these issues. But there are a lot of things that, will slip through the cracks, a lot of things that people, it's hard to monitor every single thing, every single moment of the day that you're there in the legislature. So, we as citizens, as private citizens, do have a responsibility to go and make certain issues aware, certain ideas and things like that aware. So I do push back and challenge, well, how often are you there, speaking with your legislators, how often are you at the state capitol, how often are you calling, having your friends or neighbors and stuff calling as well, because that's a way to also keep them informed and make sure they are voting right on these issues.
I love what you said, and I've made a precedent myself for the legislature since 2013. And I'm grateful because I'm here tonight, not because I was the first choice, but because Senator Cindy O'Loughlin was invited and had a conflict in her schedule, and she recommended that I be on the panel. It's that kind of relationship you build with a senator over time where they can trust you, and I feel like she's trusted me enough to put me in as her proxy. That's a wonderful relationship you can have with legislators who are trying to work for the people. So I just wanted to give her kudos for that. Second, I will tell you that the State Board of Education does not have a public comment period at the end of its meetings. There are other states that do. The only reason there were 3 meetings during the review of Common Core standards is because public meetings were required in the bill that required the review. They sit politely, they look at you and wait for the time to be over. So you really do, I think, have to build in that regular cultural idea with the state board that they're beholden to the people, because right now they are beholden to the grantors of the money that comes into the state behind the legislature's back. All right, so they are implementing whatever the grant money was allocated to do, and it's coming in from private as well as federal sources. And they don't know what that is. And that's why I applaud that mother for coming forward, because DESE needs to be audited. And all dollars flowing into the state needs to be posted on the DESE website. And all expenditures need to be reported as a checkbook. And there's no reason you shouldn't know it, because there is no money that belongs to DESE. It's yours.
My name is Natalie Scholl. I have a freshman in North Kansas City, and I have a stepdaughter in Liberty. So my question is to Dr. Westfall, Dr. Clemens, and Dr. Daniel. Critical race theory, DEI, whatever other terms that it's hidden under, is a radical belief that pushes the idea that America is an inherently racist country, and that white people are the oppressors and non-white people are oppressed. So instead of implementing such divisive curriculum that causes hate and animosity among your students, have you or will you consider implementing a curriculum like the 1776 Project, which teaches students about our American history, the good and the bad, and promotes a healthy patriotic vision that will bring students together, not as black or white, but as Americans that love their country? Would you consider this curriculum?
I'm a little confused on the rules, so I apologize for that. Thanks for sharing that comment. I'm just going to give a little bit of disclaimer, okay, as we start. I was invited to be a listening partner today, so I saw my name up here, and then I heard these folks saying they were invited to be on a panel, and obviously we see the trend of the conversation going here. Certainly, our public schools are teaching all students, and we're serving to be champions for all students. In terms of, we've had meetings in my office, and I think we've had a discussion around what we can do and what we are doing. And so I would just encourage us to come together and work together. I don't know the exact details of what you're referencing, so it's going to be hard for me to respond to that now, but I'll certainly talk to you. I mean, I think the one thing that I want to say, and then I'll turn it back, is we came here understanding that this was a listening event and that we were just to be in the audience. And that's fine. As a superintendent, I'm more than happy to get up and visit with those folks in which we serve. And I think at the end, we get a little time to respond, and I'm looking forward to that. I just didn't want you to feel like I was avoiding or not responding to each and every one of you. I appreciate your passion. I appreciate you being here. And as a public educator, we want to work together to serve all students. And I don't want you to think I'm just avoiding conversation. So for you folks that see me just sitting here, I apologize if you're taking the wrong impression.
Hi, my name is Jeff Behrens. First of all, I'm encouraged at this crowd here. I'm glad I had to park in the grass. Maybe a little historical perspective. I've lived almost all my life in Gladstone, Missouri, other than Bushland Tennessee School District, other than 6 years in the military and some time in Columbia, Missouri University. My experience going through the public school system was excellent. I mean, I felt like I was really prepared. I have 2 daughters that went to North Tennessee High School, and we call them in. My youngest daughter, I was surprised when she said, I'm going to homeschool my kids. And it's like, well, we could have missed out on so much. But so many things have happened that it's like, I think you made the right decision. I think if I had kids now, I would be seriously considering that too, especially when what's happened in the last 2 years and all the things we're hearing about. So I guess my question is, what has happened in these decades from when I was a kid to when my grandkids are kids? Something has gone way haywire, way haywire. And the other thing I think about as a property owner, I don't have kids in school, grandkids, but as a property owner, I see my taxes going up and up and up. I have owned my house for this fall 43 years. I don't remember what property taxes were, most of which goes to the school district, when I first started, but I know what they are now. And if I did the math, I'm pretty sure I paid more in property taxes than what I paid for my house at this point. And there's no end in sight. And this is a side part of what we're talking about tonight, but I'd like to see some kind of legislation, homesteading thing for people. At some point, do you get to own your home? Do you ever really own your home? I'll tell you the answer, you do not. You do not. But that's not what we're here about tonight. I just thought I'd throw that in. I'll maybe give my answer to what the question, or what some of the things I see. I feel like the next level of education, which as legislators also have some input to, I feel like the teachers that are coming in now are indoctrinated in the types of things that we're talking about. I think we have a problem with teachers' unions. One of them, they say, we're not teaching critical race theory, but out of the other side of their mouth, they say, but if you get in trouble for teaching it, we're going to defend you legally. We got a fund for you. See, what else did I hear? There was some kind of deal where there's several thousand teachers who have said that they're going to teach this, maybe not with that name, but that's going to be part of where they're coming from, whether it's legal or not legal. They've signed it, and there's ones in this area too. So they're on that. You can find it. I'm sure you can Google something. I guess I'm saying a lot of the secondhand because I hear it on talk radio and that sort of thing. But I think where there's usually smoke, there's a little bit of fire too. Anyway, and the other problem I see with teachers unions, and not just that, but public service unions in general, you have an organized, strong group. I think public service unions are stronger than private sector unions at this point. You, as legislators, you have a formidable foe if you do anything across teachers union. They can turn out people to work polls against you. They've got a whole bag load of money. And they are for the teachers, not for the children. The teachers unions want the schools to be closed in the interest of the teachers. Who's looking out for the interests of the children? The children need a union of their own. I mean, honestly. I don't know, maybe I get more, but I can't think of it right now.
I come here tonight as a parent, and I'm a law enforcement officer's wife, and I'm coming here because in the last year when the riots broke out, I actually rejoiced that our schools were closed because of COVID. Because I did not want my daughter going to school to hear what her teachers had to say, what the kids had to say. It was a very, very difficult time. My daughter actually broke down. She was so scared her husband died. And now I'm scared to send her to school some days because of what teachers are saying in the school, what kids are saying. And I don't feel like my daughter's being heard, I'm being heard. My school is not as bad as some others. I'm actually in Platte County, which is a part of Clay and Platte, and Clay side. Sorry, it's delicious. But specifically, North Kansas City has used the Education Equity Consulting Firm. If you go to their website, you actually read, and I'll quote this: students and teachers can read this chapter to explore how many police departments seek and destroy in some neighborhoods, while they protect and serve in others. I have a question for North Kansas City and my legislators. Does my child matter? Because when I read that, she doesn't. My family doesn't matter. I don't think any child should feel that way. I don't care if you're black, I don't care if you're white, I don't care if you're Hispanic, and I don't care if you wear a uniform. Every child should be respected, and every family should be respected. And no school district, no public school district should have this type of rhetoric. They should not. I don't care if you don't use that resource because that's what you say, but you're promoting it. You're promoting hate. And it is breaking my heart.
My name is Tanya Johnson, and I actually raised 3 children in Liberty. Went to college. 2 of them have families of their own now. And I have 5 grandchildren. I have to tell you, I was so proud of Liberty. My girls were cheerleaders. My kids were on soccer teams. I loved Liberty. I was proud of this school. Not so much anymore. I am so grateful that for now, my 2 grandchildren go to private school. Cost a lot of money. I even thought if I have to pay for my grandchildren to go to a private school to keep them out of Liberty Public Schools, I'll do that. I have no idea why in February I had a little bit of extra time and I had not even been to one school board meeting ever. I was PTSA president. I was involved. And I watched the school board meeting in February And they introduced our chief equity officer, Dr. Andrew Dixon Seahorn. She seems like a very sweet lady, and I'm sure she is. And she began talking, one of you gals talked about the beloved community. This is what bothers me. I am just a parent, a grandparent, and I went to look up the beloved community, and I think I told you that, Dr. Westphal. I did my research. They have a almost like a triangle, and it's what is racist and what is not, and whiteness. And you guys reached out to them and did your audit with them, correct? Yes. Why didn't somebody research that? You go all the way down to the bottom and it says BLM. It is a Marxist organization. Why? And now you guys want us to believe, because you changed it from CRT to DEI, that you're not teaching this. How are we going to be as grandparents? And by the way, I have 2 other children, twins, babies, getting ready to move here. I don't want them in Liberty Public Schools. I just can't believe that we've called it DEI. I have that book, ready to read it, that you guys have spent $63,000 on. Did you take the bid? $63,000 for the core collaborative, right? I went to YouTube to watch the co-authors. One is a white man, one is a black man. The book sounds great. And you get to the white man talking about how he wakes up feeling guilty for being white. And then you have the black author starting to talk about racism. You guys chose that. You guys took that bid. Now, me as a grandparent of my grandchildren, I'm supposed to believe that you guys have the best interest for these kids. And I said, you cannot tell a little black boy and girl that you are an oppressor. I'm more worried about them than my own white grandchildren. It makes me sick to my stomach that this is happening. What is the answer? All the grant money you've talked about? It's true, money talks. What do? All of us can go to that meeting, what is it, June 19th? And July 19th in Jeff City? I mean, this stuff is new on parents. You guys have to understand, parents are still trying to wrap their brain around this. And they're scared. And what is going to happen? You're going to have kids homeschooled, or you're going to have mass exodus when this information gets out. Then what are you going to do without your funding from the government? And I said all along, best thing you can do is take your kids out of school and homeschool. And you did it for a year, just do it. I don't know what to believe. You guys are, I talked to Dr. Tucker, and when I went and did that research, it's the same thing, just different words that you guys use with that beloved community. And now parents don't know what to believe and who to trust. So, and as far as that police officer woman, that was a beloved community. It was hate police. Did you know that? Yeah. It is on their hate thing. It says to hate the police. And it's so political because one of the racist words was, make America great again. That's racist, according to beloved community. But Dr. Seahorn, she's the one who got you guys to do that. How are we supposed to trust all this? I don't know. Thank you.
Just a quick time check. Dr. Andrews, do we have a hard stop time that we need to respect for the sake of those who are volunteering for our benefit? Okay. We have 10 minutes until 8. We advertised that we would be doing this from 6 to 8. We've got, it's like 7 people beyond the ones about to speak, so just kind of be aware of time. I want to be respectful of everyone's opportunity to be able to speak, but I also want to make sure that for the sake of our administrators and representatives who are here that want to respond, we'll have an opportunity as well. So appreciate the comments so far, and I'm going to just move on.
As a member of the advisory board of Black Voices for Trump, I assure you Mayor Reagan is not a white supremacist baby.
I'm Stephanie Godfroy, and I'm a parent in the North Kansas City School District. I have 2 children in the district. And I have way more questions than I have time for, so I will say that. I am curious as the evening has gone on, especially hearing that Cindy O'Loughlin was invited. She's not a Kansas City legislator, but other Northland legislators like Senator Arthur, who is a former teacher, was not invited. Maggie Nierenberg, who is also a Northland legislator and former teacher, was not invited. Ashley Lonnie, who represents the Parkville district, was not invited.
And she never responded. I invited her.
I don't want to, I do want to cut you off because
Senator O'Loughlin is chair of the Senate Education Committee, and she's chair of the Joint Committee on Education that will be hosting the hearing on Monday. So she's the key person in the state for education.
But our other local legislators, Northland legislators, who will have a say in our Northland schools, were not invited. And I think that to listen to parents from the Northland, that is something that is missing from this session. They deserve to hear from the teachers as well. There is so much fear being fueled by misinformation in this room. It is head-spinning. And I often find that other people have better words than I do. And so I just read this today and it was so poignant and I wanted to share it. And it's from an artist named Danielle Cook. She said, "May your critique of a cause never outweigh your contribution." And so if we are advocates of positive change, she says, we won't always agree on every method, theory, tool, or plan of action. But when we become laser focused on how much we disagree with a certain method, that it outweighs the work we're actually doing in support of the overarching cause, it begs the question, what are we actually fighting for? And so what is our goal? What is our goal here? As parents, as educators, as legislators, the teachers in the room, what is our goal?
Can we get an answer to that question from somebody up on the panel that is?
I will answer. I've wrote that down. I have no problem. I think some of you know me. I am a very open.
We all got problems though with what's going on.
No, I got you. Yeah. Yep. We've got some others, and I want to make sure that we're able to allow to speak. I don't care what perspective that they're coming from. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to speak, because that's my goal. To hear. That's why I call this a listening session to begin with. So, and then after listening to everyone, then we begin to think through how to respond, right? So.
And I'm also curious, my question for my representative, Mr. Brown, yes, that's right, I'm in your district, 16. 30 plus years, educator, government, politics, US history. Now you're on the other side. I mean, this should offer you a really amazing perspective, and I'm also curious how you feel now from the other side, and has your view of state government reaching into your classroom changed now that you're on the other side? Curious.
this, hey, all right. Thank you for the pointed question. I think. My name is Chris Brown. I'm District 16. I'm a freshman rep. I got elected last November. My district is from Liberty over to Platte County, and I straddle 152 Highway. As was pointed out, I'm from public education. I taught 32 years in the North Kansas City School District. I left Benedictine College in 1988, and I've had one employer, other than the small business that my wife and I have, but I've had one employer for 32 years, and that was the North Kansas City School District. A gentleman a little bit ago said, what has changed? I'll tell you what's changed. When I started in this district in 1988 at Winnetonka High School, I was there for 1 year. I was in Oak Park for 19. And I opened up Staley High School like 13 years ago or something. Then I did retire in 2020, kind of the spring of COVID. Good timing on that. But anyway, so I retired in 2020. But here's what has changed. If you went to Oak Park High School, say 20 years ago, if you went up and you looked in that building right now, and you walked around and you looked at the kids in there, the clientele that the North Kansas City School District, Liberty, Park Hill, any suburban school district, the clientele has changed drastically. I mean, they serve literally a global community within the district. You know how big the North Kansas City School District is? I mean, they go clear south, down to Old Northtown, and clear up here north of 152 Highway. They have thousands of kids and hundreds of teachers within that school district. It is immense. And every one of those kids brings a different set of challenges to the people within those schools. And no two kids are alike. So while I have some serious concerns, and I want to thank all of you for speaking here tonight, I have some serious concerns about CRT, 1619, et cetera, I do. And I certainly do not want to see it as a separate curriculum piece within the school's curriculum. However, having said that, I am not unsympathetic to the North Kansas City School District or these big school districts. They have an immense job of trying to educate and bring kids in that maybe have just immigrated to the United States or are first generation Americans here in the Kansas City area. And so I do think that there is validity in some of the things in terms of equity and inclusion.
You're a sellout.
Now, here's the deal. I'm not sure if you heard what I said, okay? Every political decision that is made, you have to put it on balance. Every political decision, nobody gets 100% of what they want. And if you think they do, you're just looking at it wrong. It just doesn't happen that way. So at the end of the day, the school district, the teachers, the community, this is what needs to be happening. We need to listen. We need to talk. We need to have transparency in what is done at the school district. But we don't need to shout and yell and call people sellouts. I mean, guys, I taught for over 30 years. There's not another institution in mankind that has lifted more people out of poverty than public education. I'm not willing to throw it under the bus. Okay? Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Are we at maybe a critical time and we need to look at what we're doing? Absolutely. Okay? But the bottom line is we don't need to throw rocks at each other. That's not going to solve anything. All right? So, and I'll tell you another thing. I could stand right here and tell you exactly what you want to hear, but you really want me to do that? No. I would like to think not. All right? So again, I have written 4 pages of notes. I have listened to every person that has come up here with sincerity. All right? So we'll get through this. We will. Okay? And the North Kansas City School District and public education, it's going to go on. All right? And we'll be okay. Now, at the end of the day, you may need to make some decisions that best fit your family, and I respect that. But the bottom line is, we'll get through this, okay?
Good evening. Thank you all for still hanging in there with us in this important conversation. I'm in the Liberty School District and I'm a brand new parent, 10 weeks, and I'm so tired, so I apologize for my disheveledness. But you know, I'm thinking about like, what do I want from my kid? I think about what my experience was growing up. And I grew up in a small rural town, and you know, I believe in fairness and justice and caring for people and loving on people and just doing the best you can. And I did, you know, I operated that way throughout my entire time. But while I was in school, K through 12, conversations around diversity never came up. I didn't have language for it, aside from the February conversation about Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks. And I left with this idea of Martin Luther King Jr. came and racism was solved and now we're done, right? And we know that's not true. We know that's incomplete, in short. And I don't want my kid to have to do the same kind of rough learning curve that I have to do and that I'm still doing. And what I'm hoping for is support. And I need that from my education providers. And I'm not saying that there's one right way to do it. I'm not saying that CRT is the only way or that it's complete all in its own, but I do think it's a piece of the puzzle. I think that there are pieces that we can take and value and that can help us be more informed humans, right? Because I don't think that there's a single human that is responsible for all the atrocities that have happened in history. That's just not true, right? And it's unfair. We don't want anyone to leave with that kind of message. It's not effective. But I do think that we're responsible for our choices today and our behaviors and how we treat people. And I want to do that with the most informed capacity that I can. And part of that is diversity education. And so thank you for your time and consideration and support.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing? My name is Rory. I've never felt more unwelcome in a church in my entire life, so hopefully this goes well. I am a graduate of the North Kansas City School District. I lived in Kansas City my entire life. I graduated in 2000. When I graduated, I didn't know anything about Juneteenth. I didn't know anything about Indians. Like, I thought they just got sick and died. No clue. No clue. So I was raised by two white parents, which means that my vision is here. I can't see what other people went through. I don't know what anybody else went through. And in order for me to know that, I had to teach myself. I am a college graduate. I am quite educated, but I had to do the work myself to find out what racism was because I was never given anything in my education. Fast forward, I'm the mother to two boys, but one is graduated, one is still in Hartwell School District. Do you know that they don't know what happened to the Indians? They don't know anything outside of this because the school district is put into a very small box. We have to teach our children diversity. My child cannot graduate and go out into the U.S. and talk to other people if he doesn't know how their lives are. He doesn't know how to talk to a black person because he's never interacted with a black person and what they actually deal with. Please let me talk. See what I'm saying? I appreciate this church. You guys
Hey guys,
are great.
let's respect her and let her speak. We've done that.
What I'm saying to you is that it's hard dealing with racism. It's not an easy conversation. And as a white person, there is a weight that falls on our shoulders, but there's nothing wrong with teaching our kids that, yes, this may not be the right path. But what I am saying is you have to support diversity if you want your children to be able to make it in a world outside of white people. That is what I have to say. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
I was just confused a little bit.
Can we, I so apologize. I do not want to be disrespectful. We've got five left here, and I would like to be able to make sure that we prioritize their opportunities.
I understand. I was just confused that you researched and studied and know what happened to the Indians, but don't want to teach your children that?
No, I want IB teachers.
Can we get some order here? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Megan Sims. I'm a graduate of Liberty High School, or Liberty Schools, I guess. I graduated in 2004. I am an alma mater of Missouri State University, and I currently am an RN. I had a few things I want to say speaking on the collegiate level, and so for the legislators, I would like to speak on this. I have specifically a wonderful 21-year-old junior at Missouri State that I've gotten to know. And as we were talking about diversity and classes that she's having to take, connecting because we're alma maters, she brought up an education class. She wants to be an early educator. She is studying early education. And she said that she had to take a class, and it was titled EDC 345. I asked her to specify a little bit like why this was a hard class, but she said she almost did not pass this. She said basically how the whole class went, we had Zoom classes and we were required to have our cameras on, and it was horrifying because you never knew what she was going to say or when you would call on you because you had to come up with an answer quick. That would be something she would agree with or weren't right. A lot of that also came in with paper assignments. You had to write a paper that followed with what you believed or you would most likely get a bad grade. That's what made the class so difficult for me because it was hard to come up with something she would want to hear. That is happening at the collegiate levels, and she is going to be a teacher someday, and this is going to trickle down to wherever she gets a job. So this is what's happening to some of our classes. I don't know what kind of policies or whatever accountability can be held for universities, because this is just going to happen. Like, critical race theory is being taught at large universities, and it's just going to be trickling down. Another thing I want to be brought up, and this is specifically for the districts, the school districts. I'm not sure if you're aware of what's called the Zen Education Project. It's teaching people's history. It is a pledge that teachers can go to, and they can sign this, and they're going to say that regardless of the laws, so if your state bans critical race theory, or if your districts ban critical race theory, they are signing this to pledge that they are going to teach it no matter what in their classrooms. And there are teachers in this specific city of Kansas City, Missouri, that have pledged this. What kind of accountability are you going to hold, and what kind of consequences are they going to have that they're teaching things that you do not want your teachers to be teaching, but they're thinking that they have control of their classroom because they are their teacher? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julie Fitzgerald, and I spent about 10 years, I'm retired now, but I spent about 10 years as a substitute teacher in Independence and Grandview. And during that time, I encountered, well, and now you can include CRT, but I encountered several instances where the curriculum was completely inappropriate for the age group. I was reading a book to a 3-year-old third grader from Random House, and there was a naked man in there. I mean, he wasn't full frontal, thankfully, but, my question is, would you be open to a parental curriculum review group so that we have the right and say yes or no to that curriculum? I think that's something that is totally necessary. Parents need to be more and more involved in what's happening with our kids. Secondly, my son is half Hispanic. Am I supposed to tell him that he's oppressed and I'm his oppressor? Or his white grandparents that helped raise him? Are they oppressors? Come on, this is ridiculous stuff. It divides even families if they really buy into it. My son thankfully doesn't, but, and then the third thing I have here is this just a listening session? Are we here to really affect change? Are you guys really gonna do anything? Or are you just here, are we just voicing our frustrations? You're gonna pat us on the head and send us on the way.
Hello, my name is Shane. I live in the Winnetonka district. My kids have not attended I work 2 jobs so that I could let my wife homeschool my kids. She now works at a private school so that we can afford to send them there. That's how serious we take this. And I was nervous about sending them to public education before all this started happening. There was a lot of things that made a person question. And so that's where I'm coming from, basically. And, you know, so it's not necessarily for me, because I'm going to see this through. But at the same time, for the community at large, I cannot believe that this philosophy has any salutary effect at large on its core is divisiveness. So I've just got this one thing. Let's take it. To know that CRT is wrong at its core, you only need to recognize 2 things. Number 1, if you took the occurrences of the terms white and whiteness and switched it to black and blackness and read it in a public forum, would you be nervous? Would you be nervous? I think you might, because it sounds racist. It's because it is. Number 2, no individual should ever be made to accept a guilt that they did not personally earn. For instance, there's nobody who thinks that every Muslim should be blamed for 9/11. What? No. There's nobody who thinks that all the destruction brought by BLM should be blamed on you. You didn't do that. Individuals are not responsible for a collective. So, if rejecting, evicting this divisive, racist, evil ideology comes at the cost of 6 to 10% of the budget, then the right thing to do is to not only reject that funding, but to toss it back in their faces. Right. Yeah. With maturity and with a better than
I'm Dana Granberg, and I'm a family medicine doctor in Kansas City, essentially Liberty, and I've spoken to Kansas City. And tonight, as I was kind of listening, it's amazing how alike medicine and education is, and the challenges we face, because you probably know my questions are going to deal more with masking and vaccine. But as I've gone to school board meetings now, and I never have before, and I've gone to the Clay County Health Board, I realized that my problem as a physician is the same as these parents. I'm fighting this wave of money, grant money, whether it's the CARES Act or the Clay County Health Board with CDC grants. I can produce study after study. I can produce concern after concern about our kids being masked for 6 to 8 hours. And right now it doesn't matter, because I don't have the grant money to pull that off. And it hasn't taken me very many meetings to kind of figure out these are all different problems, but they're the same beast that we're fighting. And so I know how hard it is, because I work in a clinic. Now, lucky for me, we don't give these vaccines, because I think maybe it would affect what I'm telling people about these vaccines if I got money in the back pocket to give it. So, I'm just telling you that I understand the frustration. I don't understand the CRT as much as people here, because I really came to talk about what are we going to do when this fall comes, and there will be a flu season. There will, whether it's H1N1, I saw 2 people with strep throat last night or last week, and I'm just afraid that this school is going to be back to 6 to 8 hours of our kids in masks. And I know I produced for the school board and Clay County Health Board study after study, some of them even from Dr. Fauci's mouth, some of them from the CDC, many of them from doctors who have said from day one and have good studies to back it, it is not good for our kids to wear masks. They are breathing in CO2. All of us can see the effect it's had on emotion. I see it every day in clinic. It affects their learning. It does not reduce viral transmission. And there are studies that back this, and Dr. Fauci has said it, and asymptomatic people, this is why we've never worn them for flu seasons. It's why we've never worn them for H1N1 season, which I was there and present. I saw a lot of sick people during H1N1. We never reacted this way. All I'm asking for is in these discussions, maybe people who are not biased in some way to be there to represent the kids. Because I just feel like that's what the CRT is about. It's about things being framed. Now, secondly, about the vaccination now that has been approved for 12 to 16-year-olds. I have kept my mouth shut on this vaccine since January. But when they came out and recommended an experimental injection, not FDA approved or studied on animals or humans, be injected into our kids. There are different studies that contradict the myths that are put on our Clay County Health Board site. Here is one thing. How can people make an informed consent about an injection when you cannot get the truth on it? I challenge any of you up there. About 2 weeks ago in early July, 5 people went to Capitol Hill to testify on vaccine injuries. If you today or tonight go try and Google that, and you know what it'll pull up? No, it'll pull up the representative who had the audacity to ask those people to come up and how terrible he is and how this is discredited. You watch the testimony of those 5 people because all they're asking for is to be heard and believed. And I am telling you, all we've asked for with these vaccines for these kids is for them not to, one, be bribed. My daughter will be going to Missouri State next year. I was horrified. In May, I called up and I asked, will she be ostracized? Will she not get a pretty bracelet? I was told basically all she'll miss out on is a $25 t-shirt. Well, I've been doing the studies. There are some legitimate concerns with certain things, and I won't say it because I don't have time to go into the medical stuff. But 2 days ago, I get an email, and there is drawings for free tuition. There's drawings for computers. Where does this money come from? And you know what? It's only for the vaccinated kids. Did it say anything about exemptions or kids who got? No. So these masks should not be used as punishment. We should not be incentivizing to bribe people into getting them, especially our youth. I know that not everyone agrees with that, but I'm in practice and I see these complaints and these issues, number one. Number two, I also know that I'm in the minority with probably a lot in the medical community. But if I have to speak for the CDC or the agencies and grant money or a patient, I'll take a patient every day. Yeah.
My name is Jay Richmond. I grew up, graduated from Liberty. Got 3 boys. They all go to North Kansas City. We want to thank you for being here. I know this is not easy, but I think you can tell this is hot on hot. And it really doesn't have to be boiled down to race, because critical race theory comes from critical theory. Critical theory is to criticize each and every aspect of society. To cause chaos, to break it down. That comes from Marxism. I highly encourage each and every parent, because let's be honest, we fell sick of the wheel. My wife, we have gotten involved because of what we've seen. But I highly encourage each and every parent, legislator, administrator, study it. I understand there's people here that haven't felt comfortable. And I'm sorry you don't feel comfortable. And I know a bunch of them left. But you need to go look at it. It's not hard to find. It is rooted in Marxism.
That's right.
Okay? Marxism doesn't just talk about this. What about economics? I guarantee there's people here that make more money than I do. I guarantee there's people here that make less money than I do. Race is just the lever that they're using. That's it.
That's right.
Again, it goes back to criticizing. Every aspect of society, that's their role. So my question is, what does that look like? It's a very simple question. 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, 50 years from now. If we don't, as parents and as citizens, inform ourselves, that was the goal of the founders, an informed society. If we don't inform ourselves, we don't get involved, yes, it's tiring. My wife and I both work full-time jobs. Guess what? This is a full-time job too. But if we don't do it, what does it look like in 5, 10, 25, 50 years? We won't be here. It's that simple. Thank you.
My name is Julie Bell. I'm in the Kearney School District. I also do deal with a little bit with North Kansas City. I have 4 children. 3 are mine. 1 is a bonus son. He is African American. I myself am Mexican. I'm just blonde. I'll start with my bonus son, who I love to death. Of course, he waited till the last minute to do a project. We're up till 2 a.m. to do a PowerPoint. He did Black Lives Matter. He studied the money of it. I was very proud of him. The PowerPoint was amazing. Ran at 2 a.m. It is what it is. He's 15. We'll let it go. He got told by his teacher that he was a disgrace to his color, his race. Unacceptable. He got sent. He got sent to the principal's office for it. Got pulled out of class. He followed the money. He followed the trail. I didn't punish him. I took him to Olive Garden. He's a great kid. He's not mine. I didn't birth him, but I love him as I did. My 3 kids that I birthed are in Kearney. My oldest son has been wrestling since the age of 4. He is the Rudy of wrestling. Only thing he wanted to do is grow up to go to high school and be a bulldog. I pulled him out of Kearney. I pulled him out of Kearney because he got put on a junior world team to represent not Kearney, not Missouri, but the United States of America. He was supposed to go to Estonia, and then COVID hit. The middle school principal was not going to excuse him to leave because they've never had that happen before. I wasn't saying my son doesn't need to make it up. I was saying, let's work together because he is representing Kearney, Missouri, everybody, the U.S. It was unacceptable. I finally got tired of the BS going back and forth. He is special ed. He's on a 504 plan. If you know anything about the 504 plans, you have those meetings within 3 weeks. I don't know, honey, when was it? The end of October before we had one. This is a straight A student since the 2nd grade. I got tired of it, pulled him out, and I homeschooled him all year. When he went, my husband here went and picked up his stuff. I was appalled at his notes that he took because I trusted Kearney. I did, I think. I loved it. Everything I had in my house was bulldogs. It was purple. We were Kearney all the way. Not Mountain. You got to earn that back right now because I'm not sold. Right now we're St. James. Because in my son's notes, he was in a history class. 12 chapters. 2 of American history, 10 to the Muslim culture. So you know what we did? We did 12 chapters of Sierra of American history, Indians, Mormon history, you name it, we learned it all. African American history, we learned everything. I don't understand that. I don't get that. We need to learn American history. This is where we are founded from. Not just that, he also had a seminar class. In his seminar class, I ripped his butt because of his notes. And he told me, Mom, please don't be mad. He had on there the Republican Party, the fascist, racist party, Democratic Party, party of the people. To me, that is unacceptable. That is unacceptable. I contacted the school directly. They wouldn't speak to me about it. But they would tell me is, well, Miss Bell, we watched your son walking down the hallway and talk like a normal kid, so we don't think he needs a 504 plan or special assistance. Didn't realize they had a medical degree. I have gone right around the party, so Mr. Morrison, I'd love to bring my son back, but I don't trust it right now. And I hope you can give me that faith to come back. Because I have 2 other kids, I'm about to pull out. And you know what? I'm an engineer. I'm not saying I make the best money, but I make a decent living. My husband works at Ford. If I got to go and I got to do Uber just to send my 3 kids to private school so they don't have to be indoctrinated in bullshit, I'm going to do it.
Okay, I do, honestly, I appreciate everyone's time that they have given to come in and share their concerns and to ask their questions. That is what I was committed to accomplishing tonight. I think that what is obvious here tonight, and it's not, this is just a microcosm. I mean, this is happening everywhere. There really is a breakdown in trust, and the way you regain trust is by sitting down and having hard conversations, and dealing with the fact that we're not always going to agree on things, but being willing. Believe me, I've voted on things over the last 3 years that half of my constituents hate me for, but I have to be willing to hear them out. And we may disagree, but it's my responsibility to be respectful in that conversation where there is disagreement present. You can't build trust if there's not open lines of communication. So I do appreciate your time tonight. And I know some of you have to leave, and I'm not going to interpret your departure as, you're leaving in frustration or whatever. I do want to make sure that anyone that's on the panel, as far as our administrators or legislators, that want to respond to some of the questions or comments, I think that it is appropriate to respect them in that. And I'll close up after that. So.
Well, again, I'm Danny Clemens, the superintendent of North Kansas City, and I appreciate all of your passion that you've shown tonight. If you can't be passionate about our youth, what can we be passionate about, right? And this can't be about sides. It truly can't be about sides. Those of you that are in North Kansas City know that I haven't turned down a meeting with any of you. I'm more than willing to sit down and to collaborate. Public education always needs to be about collaboration. But there's fears out there that simply need to be discussed. And I can't discuss them all with you tonight, but I mean, we kind of started this out by showing data without context and kind of started off on the wrong side, and I was like, what are we doing? But the more I listened, the more I felt, okay, I have a better understanding of how to address some of the issues that you brought forward today. So I want to say thank you to you. It's not been the most comfortable place to be up here, but I appreciate you. And I appreciate having with the Richmonds and folks, I appreciate continue to have the conversation. A few things I just want to say is that Cindy O'Loughlin, Senator O'Loughlin, she spent an entire day with us in North Kansas City. And we got to show her exactly what we were doing to improve all student success. And when she left, her quote was, If all schools were like North Kansas City, we wouldn't have these issues. So take it for what it's worth. That was the senator's words. That wasn't mine. That we didn't plant that with her. And for the wife of the police officer, I'd like to say sorry. I'm sorry. I don't think you're a part of the North Kansas School District, but from education and the service that your husband provides, that's just wrong. And I just want to apologize for what it's worth. I would feel horrible to be there. I will tell you that the North Kansas City School District, and this is important, we employ more police officers than anywhere else in the Northland. It's not because our schools are unsafe, it's just because we want to make sure that they are safe, that we keep people out that shouldn't be there. But in that, we're spending $300,000 more next year because I believe KCPD only has 4 officers during the day north of the river. And I have 21,000 kids in school, so therefore I need to make sure we're protected. And so I've been working with Councilperson Hall on that as well, and we'll get there. The Show Me Institute did a sunshine request, a freedom of information request on the North Kansas City Schools curriculum. And they particularly asked for critical race theory and many of the terms that we've heard tonight. We responded to the Show Me Institute as an audit of our curriculum by each one of our principals, and we did not turn over any curriculum that was critical race theory. But let me tell you what we do. And I think in order to tell you what we do, you've got to understand the context of who we are. We're a school district of 21,000 kids. We're the second largest in our state. About 55% of our students are white. We had some real problems with our student achievement about 10 years ago. And so we did enlist some help of some folks that it's EEC that have been brought up that had some terminology of critical race theory in what they do. But we employed them to look at our data. Although 45% of my students are non-white, we have very few non-white teachers. And I was trying to figure out how year after year, I was seeing National Merit Scholars that were black and brown, but I didn't see them in our gifted program going along. And I was trying to figure out why we weren't identifying, or why we were over-suspending black males, or some of those issues. We have looked at our data, and we have utilized help to look at our data. We're not suppressing white kids. We're not doing the things that I've heard tonight, but in order for us to get comfortable with each other, we have to talk. We have to talk, and I'm more than willing to do that. If you're a North Kansas City patron, I'm more than willing to talk, to show you what you would like to see. If you want to see our curriculum, that's great. You can see our curriculum. If you just want to come in and visit with me, whatever you would like to do, we're an open book. Your tax dollars pay us. And we want to make sure that we are responsive and supportive of every single student that walks through our door. I want just what I want for your students, for our black and brown students that are in our school. Think about 120 different languages. I don't know how to teach kids that speak 121 languages. We have to incorporate help to understand their backgrounds in order to support students, just like we do with special education and many other things in which we do. Guys, we're not bad guys. The people up here are good people. You are good people. We need to work together to get ourselves in a position. Running to a private school or homeschooling, to me, is not what it's going to be about. It's going to be about us getting to a place where we understand each other. And again, I'm just going to say I appreciate y'all, and I want to thank you for being here, and I appreciate the conversation and your truthfulness, and I wish y'all well, and my door is always open.
Agree with Dr. Clemens. One of the things I wanted to add to that conversation is we are here to engage with you because we do recognize that we serve at the pleasure. We have local control in Missouri, and we're very grateful for local control, which means we have really good partnerships with our families. We've had school improvement plans for decades to figure out how to engage our communities. Getting them to engage with us now is not a bad thing for us, so we want you to understand that. Mary, I have a card right here to tell you to call me. Because really, I will call you. We do call right away, right here. That I want to make sure we connected. Our school board president, Nick Bartlow, is here. Our chief equity officer what a tough crowd. She is here because she wants to engage. We really do want the partnerships with our families, and I really wonder if, can I ask this question? If we were, sure, to really try to work on making sure that we are being, and equality, right? But can we not have, then let's talk. Can I just ask you that it's not about the person, that it's really, here's what I think. We are trying so hard to customize and personalize learning for our children. Making sure that we identify their needs specifically. Your child is an individual to us. It's not about the collective. And so we don't want, I don't think those people who have been part of the conversation with Liberty know we are willing to listen and that we do want to partner. That is super true, and we are willing to do that and to listen. But we don't, in an era when we can customize everything, we can customize our meals at McDonald's, we can customize our orders, why can we not do that for learning? And part of that is understanding where every child is. And then if we were sitting at that end of the table, if you knew that that was where we were as individuals, would you always think that I mean, I know you don't understand me, but if I was in this audience, would it be different? Because you don't know that about me, but if you were sitting in this chair with your belief system, what would you do? But you're thinking that we're not with you, and when in fact we really are all together, and we really do want to figure this out. That's why we're here. And so if you can just for 1 second try to believe that without thinking that we're trying to dissuade you or not be transparent, we really are trying to meet the needs of our children, and we just need you to help us to do that. And that's an honest plea. We're not wordsmithing, we're not Rockwood, we're not Springfield, we're North Kansas, we're Liberty. North Kansas City and we're not somebody else. So we're here to try to give that opportunity and to be honest about it.
Then define equity.
And we are trying to define equity.
You know, in North Kansas City, one of the things I would say in providing equity is that all kids come to us in different places, from different upbringings. Well, can I speak, please? And that sometimes it's white kids. It's not tied necessarily to race. Special education, ELL. We have to take kids where they are and get them to their fullest potential. There's nothing fearful about that. It's we are trying to move kids to reach their fullest potential. We're not.
You mentioned customizing. Does my child's race factor into your customization? That's what I want to know.
Absolutely.
Whether he has a learning disability, special needs, any of that, that's neither here nor there. When you look at my child, does his race factor into how you customize how you teach him science and math?
No, it's.
I want to tell you, equity means that you're trying to control the outcome so that everybody has an equal outcome. That is the definition. Equality, I'm fine.
Okay.
That's where the gentleman was upset with the term equity versus equality. I'm shaking here. I'm not. Equality is knowing everybody is coming from different backgrounds, giving them opportunities, listening to them, and then they are to pursue that and have their own outcome. Equity is guaranteeing the same outcome for everybody.
And I did want to touch, Dana, are you still here? Yes, I thought that was you. I did talk to the Clay County Health Department today, and based on the CDC, I figured I might see you tonight. And the response that was given to me is that they have no plans to change what's currently the order. So I did want to make sure I forgot when I used my seconds.
Okay, so do you understand equity? So do you understand equity? Versus equality.
We want to ensure that students have equal access and opportunity moving forward. What I would love to share with you tonight is that we welcome the partnership and ongoing conversation, as you've heard from others here. We invite any and all to come in for deeper conversation and look forward to that. We wouldn't have accepted the invitation to show up tonight if we weren't interested in being transparent with you. So we certainly want to support that. We're so sorry to hear the instances that have happened in Rockwood, in North Carolina, in Springfield, as you discussed. We don't seek those same goals. We want you to know that from our heart. We agree with the thinking of many of our speakers here tonight. Mary, you mentioned we should be educating students for their future, not for political indoctrination. We couldn't agree more. We share a common value in that. We are certainly not seeking white oppression, not seeking blaming all whites for the history of slavery. I gotta tell you, I have 2 boys. I want to guarantee that I want no less for them than what I do the black neighbor down the street. That's our heart. That's where we're coming from. And I know many of the parents sitting in the room here tonight feel the same way about that. You've helped me definitely firmly see we're not your enemy. Any of the concepts that you've outlined here regarding CRT, they're much too sophisticated for a K-12 curriculum. We are educators who know that that is not the place where it needs to be. We appreciated Megan's viewpoints too, that we don't offer a single viewpoint. As a social studies teacher myself, I see that it's a very important point to reference primary source documents, varied viewpoints, have critical thinking conversations. And lastly, I just would love to state, please don't paint us as not being patriotic. Again, I was a social studies teacher. My dad was a Marine in Vietnam. I am so proud of this country, and we simply want all kids to have access and opportunities in this great nation. Thank you for tonight.
Just real quick, I'm the exception to the rule. I graduated from high school, and I'm gonna tell on myself. I graduated with a 1.25, not because I was dumb, because I was mad at the world and I was angry. I had teachers who tried to push me. They were white. I had teachers who wanted me. They saw the smartness in me. I didn't see it. I would sleep in class, wouldn't do my homework. The reason why I passed, because when I took tests, I aced it. Had one teacher say to me, "You cheated, didn't you? You got an A on your test and you never turned in your homework." And I said to her, "How did I cheat when I was the only one that got an A in the class?" She said to me, my point is this. I didn't live up to my potential because I made excuses for where my life was. I cannot buy into the narrative that I was oppressed because the white person over here had slaves back in the day, their ancestors owned slaves. Where I ended up was because of my decisions. But despite all that, growing up in a foster care system, guess what I didn't do? I did not end up as the statistic that they like to throw out. 25% of black men end up in this. You have this percentage of ended up being dead, in jail, on drugs, etc. I don't drink, smoke, do drugs, never been in jail, don't have a police record, and now I'm the Missouri chapter president for the Frederick Douglass Foundation and the regional coordinator in Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa.
I want to thank all the people that spoke tonight. And my main goal tonight, as a parent in Kearney, as an administrator and educator, my wife, she's an educator as well in special education. But I wanted to hear what you were from the CRT and the DEI. I wanted to hear what your perspectives were, because it helps us understand where you're coming from in different things that you talk about and leaving this in there. And I do. We had a couple parents come in and talk with us with our academic service director last week, and we appreciate that, because I think a lot of times we tend to put things together in an email, and an email can be interpreted a lot of different ways. But boy, when we are in together in a one-on-one conversation, I feel like that we can accomplish a lot more. And I appreciate that. And I know it's not easy to get up in front of the microphone, in front of a crowd, and be passionate about your topic. And it's tough. I will tell you that I'm very passionate about education. I've been that way. I graduated from Kearney. I want to see great things for not only when I leave the school district, but my kids on. I have a former, student or classmate. He's a couple years younger than me. I do have more gray hair than him, but it was good to see him here today. And I know that he's passionate about Kearney as well. And so I appreciate that perspective. And I know sometimes we don't always see eye to eye on things, but I do appreciate the dialogue that you can sit down and talk with us about that. And we hope that we can get, the main goal is that we want our kids graduating high school, they're college and career ready, and that they have an opportunity to succeed in our great nation. And that's really our main goal. And you as parents, grandparents, you help us give good perspectives that sometimes we don't see because we all have sometimes tunnel vision. So I appreciate that. And I know sometimes as this meeting started, I was a little uneasy, I'll admit it. I thought, this is going to be a tough crowd. But as I started to hear and listen, it gives me a more perspective of some of the things that where you're coming from and what you guys have researched. So thank you. Thank you for taking the opportunity to get up in front of the mic and talk to us tonight.
So why did Kearney hire a racial equality and equity person to come back for part-time after she retired? My stepdaughter went to her retirement party. She told her she's coming back part-time to teach racial equality and equity. Isn't that the same words as CRT? Why do we have a superintendent that was drinking down in I mean, think about it. You guys can come up there and say whatever you want. You kind of sound like a politician, Mr. Brown. I don't care. Don't know you. I'm good with that. But you can go up there and you say whatever you want to, but people are going to pay attention to your actions. And that's what's going to get you reelected. Because when you go and you start messing with people's kids, they're not going to forgive you. Nobody is. I'm down with my grandkids. And I know for a fact you did that in Kearney. And there's a teacher that is from Liberty, pulled up. Her daughter came sent home a thing for her mom to sign a healthy relationship thing. It was supposed to be a class, right? Well, her mom got on desk and started looking all the way down until she found that Planned Parenthood was sponsoring it. Now, contrary to AOC's brilliant mind, Planned Parenthood is not to save lives.
So I want to interrupt just for a moment, and anybody correct me, put me in my place that time. We are outsiders to Northland, but we have been talking to families and school districts across the state, and this is a very uncomfortable conversation. It's your kids, it's educators, administrators, oftentimes get in it because they're passionate about it. So it's on both sides, but I do want to give this group tonight some positive feedback that we can speak to, and this is the first time we have seen administrators show up to the conversation. I think that we probably have a pretty good base of where this group feels on the issues. And I do hear from each and every one of them up here tonight that they are interested in this and they do want to address it.
And again, I have to say, this is the first time we're experiencing that across the state. So I believe Dr. Byrne has some coming at her event in Springfield in a couple of weeks that she's going to be speaking on. But this is really the first time. So I think...
There's another admin who has not had a chance to address this.
He had to go. I mean, he did stay till about 8:30.
Gentleman with the glasses, I'm so sorry. Did you speak, sir? And did I miss it completely?
Yeah.
I'm a legislator, I'll speak.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to take a moment. I know, I'm sorry. I just wanted to take a moment to see if we could try to get some positive from the conversation and figure out next steps, because you may feel on opposite sides, but this is the first step to figuring out what the solution is. And as long as we remain respectful and try to keep emotion out of it, I really think this group is going to be able to move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. Did you want to make a closing comment?
Just very, very briefly, it's getting late. I just want to make sure everybody understands. I've taught for 32 years in the North Kansas City School District. As far as I know, not one time did a parent call me, a vice principal, superintendent, whoever, and say that Mr. Brown was injecting his own personal agenda in that classroom. I think as long as the state, the school districts, and teachers teach academics and not activism, we will all be fine.
That sounds great, but they are literally doing that now. What are you going to do to make that stop?
Events like this.
This isn't enough.
But it's a start. It's a start. Okay? Believe me, you have our attention.
Cecilia, what you got?
Hi, my name is Josh Holbert. I'm representing. I left that mic on the entire time muted and it died on me. So again, my name is Josh Holbert. I represent District 12, which is Kearney, Smithville, a little bit of the Nashua area, and then over in the Platte County as well. So what we have in this room is a microcosm of the difficult discussions we are having as a nation on all sides of the issue. You know, personally, when it comes to critical race theory and how do we tackle it in the classroom? I have hesitation when it comes to legislation because it is a sausage-making process. So how do we get something that actually addresses the issue without compromising our teachers' ability to teach? But at the same time, when we have an issue that is a process that is creating, that foments division, that is creating other issues, then we have to address that as well. So the biggest thing that I'm taking out of this, just my background, I was homeschooled. I did kindergarten in Davidson Elementary in Dr. Clemens District, and that was it. Everything else, I was homeschooled. My wife was homeschooled. My 5-year-old daughter, we plan on starting kindergarten this fall as a homeschool kid. Hearing all sides of the issue, hearing it from parents that this is a problem, hearing from teachers that on both sides of this issue that this is a problem. Well, that is helpful for me, and that's why I came, was to listen to you and then take that back to Jeff City either in January at the latest when we head back into regular session, or the governor calls a special session on this as he has been asked to by the House and Senate education chairs. So I appreciate everyone for coming out. I appreciate the difficult conversation we had tonight, and I look forward to continuing to work on this issue.
Well, I'm a little afraid to speak. Is it safe? I want to thank everybody for coming out, everybody who sat up here and braved this very colorful crowd here today. As I said earlier, I work in education. I am not from the Northland. I'm originally from a small trailer park in southeast Arkansas and was raised in inner city Kansas City, where I still live, 36th in Brooklyn. I got involved in education. I've worked in politics for the past decade of my life. Really got involved in education because I decided there needed to be an issue that I wanted to really focus on. And I graduated from inner city public school, did graduate with honors, but honestly, most of us did not, and most of them don't to this day. It all changed really when I had my daughter almost 10 years ago. This year would have been her 10th birthday. When I had her, I was still living in the inner city, and I said, there's no way in this world that I would ever send my child to a school in this community. No way. I mean, just based off of what I experienced there, and also what I see other kids experiencing in that community, or in my community, I should say. Tomorrow actually is, while it's a good day legislatively, it actually is not a great day personally. It marks the 6-year anniversary of my daughter being run over by a car and losing her life. After that, that was really the silver lining. There was a real silver lining that came out of that situation. I got to see just how much we really needed a voice, or more voices, and more people fighting for school choice or more options, which I call education equality, in the legislature, in politics, in government, and things like that, which is why I am so passionate about this issue. It led me to do a lot of research and educate myself on things that I didn't really know. I didn't know how bad things were. My alma mater, which is Central High School, right on 32nd in Indiana, in 2019, I looked at their standardized testing scores, or their math scores, and only 12% of the students are on grade level for English. 12. On grade level or above, or advanced. Does anybody want to take a stab at what that is for math? 0.8. 0.8. Yet, in Kansas City, Missouri. And yet, the schools are allowed to stay open. They're allowed to fail those kids, slip through the cracks. You want to talk about, inequities, or not inequities. You want to talk about, systematic racism. You want to talk about this, and people have their opinion about it. But when they do talk about the disparities when it comes to race and education, you never really hear the conversation centered around academia. You want to talk about history, you want to talk about, just feelings and emotion and social justice activism, but you don't want to talk about the fact that these kids aren't really given a fair shot because they can't even read. So, there's going to continue to be a wealth gap in the Black community versus the white community because we're not even given a fair shot from day one. Of course you can't go be an engineer like her because I can't even do math. No, I really can't. I'm not that good. And it's really unfair. We can joke about it and things like that, but it's really unfair because this is what these children are facing. There are studies that show that if kids are reading on this level, most of them are going to end up in prison. Most of them are going to end up here. There are pathways to success, but there are also pathways to failure and poverty and prison. And that needs to be more the conversation. So I'm not for critical race theory. I'm very against this kind of ideology because it doesn't make sense because history is not a theory. History is fact. So, thank you. So I do stand here as a person who is more pro private schools, particularly private Christian school and homeschool. But I do thank the public school administrators for being here and and braving people who don't necessarily agree with everything about them. But I do think that this conversation does need to be more centered around academics, academia, and making sure that kids are on the grade level when it comes to reading, math, arithmetic, and all that stuff. Is that the same thing?
I'd like to summarize my thoughts by answering that gentleman's question there about what happened. And I will tell you how I had an outstanding public school education, but it was a classical education offered in the public schools because that was what the schools were constitutionally authorized to do, to protect the rights and liberty of the people. What happened in 1980 was the initiation of the U.S. Department of Education. It was done at the behest of the NEA to get Carter reelected. He didn't get reelected, but the Department of Ed stayed. And the whole point of that was to begin the centralization of education from Washington, D.C. And it happened with the grants flowing from there to the states to reframe, reorganize education to be a national education, not a local education. And I'm sorry, I have to disagree with anybody who says we have local control. We do not. What also happened in 1960s was the new left radicalization of everything. Those people entered the universities, and would you like to know what Bill Ayers did for a doctorate? Early childhood education. Because they know. They know if you infiltrate the schools, you capture the children. And you can see videos on YouTube of Bill Ayers coaching people on how to basically hijack the classroom for the new left's ideology. So you have teacher education programs that have adopted the philosophy of the reconstruction of society through the schools. And that's what they're teaching the teachers, as was testified by one of the mothers here about her friend. Those teachers come out into the classroom, and then you have the current situation where school districts are hiring consultant firms for equity, which is not equality.
Right.
I'll tell you a very dangerous thing that happens when you focus on making the data numbers look the same when the quality behind that data is not the same. All right, and I'm going to use other school districts as examples so we don't get personal here, but I will tell you about Chicago, where they offered advanced math, standard math, and intermediary math. Intermediary math was that section that was to nurture those kids above the standard math for basic level to prepare them for advanced math so that they could matriculate into courses like calculus and trigonometry. Because what Common Core did was it moved algebra from grade 8 to grade 9 so that you don't have enough time for calculus and trigonometry, which would be, I mean, there's some districts that offer it as a separate track, but on the whole, in general, what you have now done in the name of equity is lower the expectations for all children, particularly in math. So using Chicago as an example, when the numbers for racial distribution within the courses was not going to show equity, they eliminated the intermediary math. So now anybody who's on the high end of the standard level doesn't get any coaching to now put them into the advanced level. And that's what the numbers do. The numbers are also used in your discipline reporting. So we're not talking about critical race theory taught as a theme of instruction. We're talking about it as a lens through which you shape your policies, select your materials, and design your activities. And yes, critical race theory, by design, an integral part of it is active civics, or the active engagement in anti-racist activity as defined by the left. All right? So it's not answering questions on an exam. And that's what the fear is. When you keep saying we're not teaching critical race theory, show me the selection of your materials and your activities, because I could give you a generic statement in your curriculum and in your standards, and you may still be teaching critical race theory because it's in the software on your laptop. And that's what's going on. Plus the hiring practices. I've seen in the state of Missouri the proposal for a hiring practice which is called proportional representation. They don't call it that in the proposed statement. But proportional representation means you divide your personnel into categories that reflect the categories, the percentage of the categories of race represented in your district. I'll tell you right now, there's already been 2 U.S. Supreme Court cases that said that's unconstitutional. Because in America, we value competence and excellence. And you will have the freedom to select your best employee for their excellence, not for their skin color. Critical race theory isn't a curriculum. It's the lens through which you design your behavior. And I'll tell you, conversation is not enough. Parents feel like what you're doing is opening the valve to let the steam out so that now there's no pressure. What they want is their values represented in the content and the instruction of their children so that they don't feel undermined by a school district who's secretly teaching something than what they teach at home. I will be at the Joint Committee on Education on Monday. I will give 7 minutes of the breadth and depth, but I'll tell you, it is systemic. It is not what's going on in the classroom, it's what's going on in the universities, in the teacher professional development, in the hiring practices, and in the consultant firms that are selected for the indoctrination.
I don't have much to say. I just want to thank you guys for showing up. This is really important. Just showing up. There is strength in numbers and our voices will be heard. I do appreciate you guys being here and hearing us out. I do appreciate your perspectives. I appreciate just having this space because that's what it's about. We can't do this by ourselves. We can't do this without the administrators. We have to do this together. So you guys keep doing your research, keep fighting. We have to be the voice for our children.
Yes.
Okay.
A shout out to the Baptists. Every time I've done a presentation in a church, it's been a Baptist church.
With all that being said, I will let Representative Richie close us out.
You're too kind. The issue that we're facing tonight in our conversation is more pervasive than any of us are aware of. I sat through about 3 hours of a hearing a few weeks ago when we were in our special session, and there was a bill that we were hearing in the Budget Committee. Obviously, it's a lightning rod question that was before us. But what became very apparent as individuals came in to testify, person after person after person, against the idea that we were considering, was there were statements, almost as if they were reading from a script, that perpetuated a perspective that the healthcare system was built on racist policies, was built on a system of racism. We had OBGYNs coming in and talking to us about safety net healthcare providers and how that they were, this particular OBGYN was just absolutely overcome with concern regarding the racism that was inherent in our safety net providers, of which she was one. When we have conversations that are focused on any number of sectors within the state, critical race theory comes up over and over and over again. Tonight we're talking about education, which is critical. Every one of us in this room, I don't care what side you take on this issue, every one of us recognize that education is critical. And so much of what has permeated these other sectors, whether you're talking about the healthcare system or the way that we provide utilities to people, or, you know, you name it, critical race theory is tied to it. The Missouri Realtors Association is focusing on these issues for their annual training. They're going to get 6 credit hours of training this summer on this issue for the ongoing work of maintaining the real estate licenses. I mean, it's everywhere, right? We have to navigate this. We have to understand it. We've got to have these conversations. I do understand it requires more than talk, but let's never discount the value of discussion. This, I tell you, if I had coordinated a town hall 2 years ago on curriculum, I don't know that we would necessarily have a turnout. Like, I mean, right? I mean, what I'm seeing in front of me is not just simply us having a conversation of people talking and sharing their concerns. You guys are taking up the gauntlet to say we need to take responsibility as parents, as caregivers, as teachers, to make sure that we are engaged in the process. That is good. That is helpful. It is no surprise to anybody in here that has seen anything on social media from me leading up to this event or prior. You know where I stand on these issues. But I will tell you this. I know on the Joint Ed Committee, we've been hearing from teachers that are concerned about this. Teachers aren't the enemy. It's the same thing we have with law enforcement, the concerns with law enforcement, right? I mean, we're accusing law enforcement as evidence of systemic white oppression, right? You have a law enforcement officer that does something that officer shouldn't do, and we castigate the entire profession. And what we recognize in those conversations is that that's not right. We have solid educators that are working very hard in the education space to provide quality education, and they too are frustrated with the very things that you guys are frustrated about. And many of them find it very difficult to speak out because they work in a collaborative network of teachers. And it's like me. I've already been accused, I mean, look at me, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious the descriptors that people would use of me, that I don't understand because of the color of my skin. And when you're operating in a space that in many respects, not every district, but in some, and in most districts, it is the same thing that's happened in every other sector. It has seeped in. It's seeped in. It's like after 9 o'clock, and I didn't sleep much last night. So it is seeped in to so much of the fabric of our culture, and so it is very difficult. I have friends, good friends, who are in administration. I have good friends that are teachers. I have great friends who are parents that are concerned. And I think that what we have to do is continue to value engagement, but we have to try to regain trust, and that's going to require both sides to do things differently. There are too many exposés and videos where I was on a webinar a couple of weeks ago where there were comments made by one of the keynotes that is absolutely devoted to CRT, intersectionality, exposing white supremacy and white privilege and things of that nature, speaking in ways that was disparaging to parents as though parents are the problem. And we have to get to our children at the earliest of ages to protect them from the culture of their parents. And that is, so I mean, those are, right. So those are the issues that are driving so much of the fervor, because that erodes any kind of confidence or the freedom to even think that we can trust, right? At the same time, I've sat down, I was one of those dads that every time we had a parent-teacher conference, I was the one that would walk into a parent-teacher conference and I would, hey, what's going on? I mean, we were blessed. We had 2 daughters that they did very well in school. So I talked to the teachers about their challenges, what they enjoyed, all the, things of that nature. One of the chief concerns that teachers have is the lack of parental involvement. And now, you guys would probably not fall into that category, but this is the deal. I will say this.
I stopped going to the parent-teacher conferences because they didn't listen to me about my own.
Well, and
And I was counted as one of those parents that didn't care because I didn't go anymore. And then because they didn't listen. What was the point of going to a parent-teacher conference when they asked me, do you have books in your house? What are you talking about? Well, your son seems like he comes from a home that doesn't read. And I said, I've been reading to him since he was in my womb. But they don't listen, so that's why they don't show up.
Well,
It's not habits of parents to check in on us. So
Sure.
we're not used to that. Well, that's not my problem. Answer my questions.
Yes. So that's, the reference there was not specifically to parent-teacher conferences. It was just more and I will say this, and I believe not only anecdotally, but I think there's plenty of evidence to prove this. As the family has continued to disintegrate, it has created pressures and strains on every other system and culture. And yes, right. So those are issues that have to be addressed, but the school district can't address that. We have to figure that out. We have to start thinking of how to encourage our kids to think about the value of family, relationships within the family, taking care of one another, being responsible for one another. Because quite frankly, parents are the chief responsible party for the education of their children. It's not the district's responsibility first and foremost. It is the parents' responsibility. School districts supplement the responsibility of those parents. Now, John Dewey would disagree with me, but that's okay. The reality is, to the degree that parents engage in terms of their children's activities, education, things of that nature, taking care of their children, to the degree that parents care for their kids, you see a corresponding increase in terms of the improvements of outcomes in their lives. And it's the same thing that we need to be recognizing when it comes to children as they are coming into adulthood. We need to help teach them that there are certain things, if you begin to do, you can improve the outcome of your life. And things like waiting until you get married to have a child. I mean, just things like that, right? I mean, you don't have to tie that to a Judeo-Christian perspective. I mean, that's just the data is there. You get a work, you get a job, you have children at the appropriate time in that respect, and the numbers bear all that out. So this is a very complex and yet at the same time a very simple issue. And what we have to do is to continue to press into looking at these issues and finding ways to yes, work for transparency, yes, work toward accountability, parental engagement, engaging the school boards, engaging your teachers, engaging your school administrators, and yes, engaging people like myself that you don't always agree with all the time. But yes.
Because I said that forever. But how do you make that happen when the federal government encourages you to have 8 different babies and not to be married, you're going to get more money? How do you fix that?
There is.
I get that. And the point is, I mean, statistics show that, 2-parent families, is part of the problem.
And interestingly enough, a 2-parent family with children, no matter the ethnicity or the color of skin, the outcomes are much better.
exactly.
It's not tied to some racial descriptor. It is tied to the dynamic of the family and behaviors in life that end up producing better outcomes. So, yes, listen, it is 9:20. It is 9:20. We have volunteers that have been here for a very long time to be a blessing to us. We appreciate it.
I want to thank you for coming. And somebody said, are you going to take up an offering now? I said no, but if you'll stand with me, I will pray for us as we go out. I'll put my 2 cents in. By the way, visit a Baptist church and worship there this week. I thought something was funny when I was a little boy. This tells you how old I am. In the early 1960s, when my teacher told us we couldn't pray in school anymore. Let's pray here. Father, thank you so much for your grace and for the patience that we've had. We've gotten a little bit hot under the collar at times, but we hope that we've listened and we've learned and we can go forth and continue the dialogue and think about these things. I'd like to say, Father, that according to your word, justice is your justice and righteousness is your righteousness. And you've shown us that when Jesus died on the cross for our sins. May we come to you and seek how to be just and kind and loving and to show forth as disciples of our Lord and Savior Jesus how we can give people hope and how we can help them grow because your divine will is perfect and Jesus above all is the Prince of Peace. It's in his name we pray. Amen. Amen. Please be careful going outside. There may not be as many lights, and some of you park out into the grass.